Good morning. I call to order the County of Placer Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, December 12, 2017 at 9:01 a.m. We will begin this morning with the flag salute led by Supervisor Wygant. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, Supervisor Wygant. We will now move to our consent agenda. This is a roll call item. All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval by the County Executive Department. All items will be approved by a roll call vote. Anyone, however, may ask to address consent items prior to the board taking action, and any item may be moved for discussion. Is there any member of the board who would like to move anything from consent? I see none. Any member of the public who would like to move anything from consent for discussion? Okay, I see none. I will bring it back to the board. We have a motion and a second. This is a roll call.
Duran. Yes. Wygant. Yes. Holmes. Yes. Euler. Abstain. Montgomery.
Yes. All right, the consent agenda passes. Now is the time for public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the board on items that are not on today's agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person, since time allocated for public comment is 15 minutes. If all comments cannot be heard within the 15-minute time frame at the beginning of the board meeting, public comment will be taken up again at the end of the board meeting, at the end of regular session. Please understand as well that the board is not permitted to take any action on items addressed under public comment. Is there any member of the public that would like to make public comment on any item not on today's agenda? Now is your opportunity. I see someone in Tahoe. Please come forward.
Good morning, Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. Happy holiday season to one and all there in Auburn. I hope you took serious consideration of the request I made for the final approval through design review on the Tahoe City Lodge. There are some components that are part of the project that were approved as an entire project that are going to be not talked about and discussed as part of the design, and it's all an integral portion of how this project is going to work properly with public health and safety in the easement, snow removal, etc. I know the county needs to get this project on the ground. I am not trying to stop this project by any means. I just think we need to do this process correctly. If this can come back in January to the design review, and I will be there this evening with lots of charts and similar issues. I'm hoping that we can come to a decision that it makes sense to not rush this. January, they're not going to be breaking ground. February, they're not going to be breaking ground. The permit process isn't that difficult, and I would hope that you took this very seriously. I will leave a packet with a lot more pictures of the comparison of the design that's changed, and appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Is there anyone else in Tahoe who would like to speak under public comment? If so, please come forward. And there's a lovely little dance going on there. Welcome.
Should I take it up front?
And if I could ask, if you could hold on just a moment, please. I think we're working on hearing you guys. It's a little difficult, but if you could try to speak directly into the mic, that would probably be really helpful to all of us.
Okay.
Okay. Give it a shot in Tahoe. Thank you.
There we go.
There we go.
Hello?
Okay, you can start now. I think we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good morning, Board of Supervisors, Chair Montgomery. My name is JT. I'm the Executive Director of the Tahoe City Downtown Association. And on behalf of the TCDA, we just wanted to thank you for the extension of the RFI process here in Tahoe City for the Station 51 Firehouse. We have a lot of excited community members and organizations that are interested, and we are working diligently to bring those folks together so that we can create a great opportunity for downtown Tahoe City. So happy holidays. Thank you very much, and we definitely appreciate the extension.
Thank you, JT. Any other public comment in Tahoe? Yes, please come forward.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors, Chair Montgomery. John Melrose, Cedar Flat resident, former county employee. Wanted to make sure I touch base with you all today. Number one, because I wanted to make sure that David Bosch realizes I finally took his advice. Excuse me, we had a meeting a couple of years ago, and I'd asked the best way to get involved, or the best way to raise my stature amongst the community so that I could possibly work it out to get a county job up here in the basin. That didn't work out, but he did say to get involved in the community. So to that end, now that I'm no longer a part of the county as an employee, I'm going to be hopefully getting involved in some of the boards and commissions up here where the air is a little bit thinner, and I can hopefully do some good up in this community and then see what happens from that point. And I also want to thank the Board of Supervisors for giving me the opportunity for the last 5 years of being one of your department heads. It was very great for my own needs, and I hope that I did some good for the community as a whole. So I wanted to thank you very much. And David, thank you again. That was some excellent advice, and I'm happy to be taking it this time. And I hope you have fair winds and following seas, as they say back in the Navy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Any other public comment in Tahoe? I see none. Any other public comment here in Auburn before I close public comment? Okay, I see none. I'm going to close public comment. We will now move to board member and county executive report. Any board member reports? Supervisor Holmes.
This morning, I was joined with Chair Montgomery and Supervisor Wygant at the dedication of the Harriet White Expressway on Bell Road, which goes from Highway 49 to 80. Harriet White, under the leadership of her leadership, was able to expand Bell Road to 4 lanes. Was kind of a unique finance operation and a courageous move on her part to move forward to expand Bell Road to 4 lanes, which allowed more traffic relief on Highway 49. So I want to thank you for joining me, and I appreciate the board's support on naming that stretch of Bell Road in honor of Harriet White. She was there, and she was very, very gracious and humble that we did that for her. Thank you.
She was indeed. County Executive Office, any report? Okay, excellent. Well, we will move then to our first timed item. This is a 9:05 timed item. It is 9:08, so we're not too far off. This is a resolution regarding the Auburn State Recreation Area. This is something that I'm bringing forward. I am asking our board to adopt a resolution in support of a river-based recreation economy in the Auburn State Recreation Area. I'm bringing this forward at this time because 3 of our fellow partners in the greater Auburn area, the City of Auburn, the Auburn Recreation and Park District, and the Auburn Chamber of Commerce, have all taken similar actions to support the recreation-based model that has grown up around the Auburn State Recreation Area. And so I did ask a couple of folks to join us today. I believe we have Gary Estes here. And Gary, if you wanted to come forward to make just a few comments for a little bit of context for the board, now would be a good opportunity. I am assuming all my board members read the resolution and are familiar with it, but basically it just reiterates the fact that the 3 other entities with whom we work have taken this position, that there is a significant economic benefit to the recreation-based, river-based economy. I can say that. It's a bit of a tongue twister. And that it is in support of these other groups and entities that I bring this forward today. Welcome.
Good morning, board members. My name is Gary Estes. I've been an Auburn resident for 27 years, and the question about Auburn Dam, when I came here 27 years ago, we had bumper stickers that built it, damn it. project was never built for various reasons. Sacramento went ahead and found other solutions for their flood control issues. They've just dedicated recently a $900 million new auxiliary spillway at Folsom Dam, which will use forecast to help operate the reservoir to release water sooner in floods. Also, there's an authorized raise of Folsom Dam of 3.5 feet, which is currently under design. And also, there have been over almost $300 million spent on levee improvements on the Lower American River. So why did we bring this to you at this time or make this recommendation? Well, Auburn in 2003 said they were the endurance capital of the world and has been investing a lot of effort into that activity. And then in March of this year, the Auburn Dam Council convinced the San Juan Water District to put up $5,000 for a $35,000 study to look at water options by building an Auburn Dam and working in conjunction with Folsom Dam. And we felt that we think the world that we live here in Auburn has changed because the city's economic endurance plan, which they came out in January this year, talks about, and I'll quote, it says, Auburn's access to open spaces, fast-moving rivers, and a network of rugged hiking and biking trails make it a haven for outdoor enthusiasts from weekend novelists to endurance athletes. So this resource has been recognized by the city, and we can go down into the central square of Auburn and see there's an obelisk that talks about the endurance capital of the world. I don't know if all the members of the board have seen that. There are granite tiles in the sidewalk around various parts of that square, honoring people who have done so much for the Western States Endurance Trail preservation, for the endurance run, and also the Tevis Cup ride. So we felt that the world had changed here. We need to go put our finger into the wind and see where we were as a community. And so that's why the process began to go to the city of Auburn, who used to be a Auburn Dam supporter in the years past, and then to ARD because they have recreational needs in the area, and for the Chamber of Commerce because when I came here years ago, Bruce Cosgrove, who was the executive director of Auburn Chamber, was the president of the Auburn Dam Council. And so we were in the Build It, Dam It day. But now we're in a different day, and so we felt that we ought to have that evaluation for where we are as a community and take a stand and let the rest of the world know where we are now, and that's why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I open it up for public comment, I would like to open it up to the board to see if there's any questions that the board has on this item. Okay, I see no lights. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on this? I see a representative from ARD. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike Lynch. I'm here in two roles. Happy holidays, board and staff. First, as chairman of the Auburn Area Recreation and Park District, we just want to let you know that we did pass a resolution very similar to the one that you have before you, and that the city passed, and I think our passing of that resolution is encouragement to you to pass that. Secondly, as a private person, many of you know that for over 35 years I served as a ranger, supervising ranger, and superintendent for the Auburn State Recreation Area. And during that time, as a partner of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, I didn't professionally think that I should express a public view on my view of the best possible use for the canyon and the river. However, I have retired. And I was first able to express that view publicly on voting for the ARD resolution. But personally, as someone who has probably on a day-to-day basis over 35 years been a part of the American River Canyon, the river, the recreation, the natural resources there, the value to the community, the identity of the community, to be very honest, you can't read the Auburn Journal almost any day without references to activities, things occurring in the American River Canyon, the lure of it, people who moved here because they want to run, hike, swim, boat, kayak, all those things going on. Our figures, you know, that in good years, we're over 1 million people are using the area now. The economic benefit is established. So on a personal side, I would encourage you to vote for this as the not only proven factors that it is, but for the benefit of the future, that it remain a river-based recreation and natural mecca. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Board of Supervisors and Madam Chair. I am Cheryl Mackey, and I am serving on the Auburn City Council as Vice Mayor at this time. And I won't repeat everything that Keith said, but I would like to say that in 2003, I was on the City Council when we named Auburn the Endurance Capital of the World. Now, that was a little progressive at that time, but we did have the Western States in the Tevis Cup. Even though there are a lot of other smaller endurance events and a lot of use of the canyon going on at that time. But it does pull in, as we found out, our economic development efforts. It has pulled in over 1 million people a year to our canyon. Our canyon is filled now with people who not only run and ride horseback, but they hike and they bike, and it draws a lot of people to our area. So we're really proud that we named it the Endurance Capital of the World, but we took another step this year, and we decided that we would pass a resolution very similar to the one that's before you today, to make it very well known that we love our canyon as a river-based recreational area. And we hope today that you will join us in making our magnificent canyon, all of us, making it more available to people as forever and in the future as river-based and canyon-based recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Welcome.
Welcome, Madam Chair, Board of Supervisors. Keith Nesbitt, Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. In history, the Chamber of Commerce has supported the Auburn Dam. Bruce Cosgrove was on that. I'm not going to reiterate a lot of the facts that have already been stated. But when we met, we really chose to look at it from an economic and a business standpoint. And so we are really comparing a river-based recreation economy as opposed to a reservoir-based economy. And we already have the draw, not just hiking, kayaking. There's a lot of uses for the river and the canyon. And what we really decided was, in a reservoir-based economy, the water fluctuations can diminish the attraction of that recreation resource quite a bit. With the river and canyon-based economy, water levels, the time of year, whatever kind of a rainfall we've had, or water levels in the river, don't change the attraction to that area. And so we have seen an increase in visibility of the Auburn area because of the canyon and the river-based economy. And the Auburn Chamber felt like we are on a roll. The city of Auburn is in the process of developing the brand as an adventure destination, and that adventure takes place in the canyon as well as a lot of the endurance events. So we hope that you will join us in supporting that river-based recreation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Mike Garabedian here on this item for Placer Group, Sierra Club, and Friends of the North Fork. Sierra Club and Friends of the North Fork, thank you, Supervisor Montgomery, for bringing this item forward, and we support the resolution.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments on this, either here or in Tahoe? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment and I'll bring it back to the board. Just before we move to a motion, I would just also like to remind the board that I do serve on the American River Authority, and at our past meeting, we did take an action in which we removed the mission of a dam from our mission statement and replaced it with supporting recreational activities and appropriate water management of the American rivers, plural, as our mission. So I will just bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure? We have a motion. We have a second. All right.
Under discussion?
Yes.
So my concern is obviously the board taking a position contrary to what we historically have had, and that is one in support of some sort of water storage within the American River Canyon area. Last time California built water storage was 1961 when Oroville was commissioned. We had 16 million people in the state. We're closing in on 40 million people. We have not added additional surface storage in the North State. We are seeing the collapse of aquifers because of overdraft of groundwater. And as somebody that regularly enjoys recreation in the American River Canyon, did my first half Ironman there, ironically using the very road that was built in order to build the Auburn Dam for the run portion of it. While this is unquestionably a beautiful river canyon and one that many enjoy for recreation, there are scores of beautiful river canyons and beautiful canyons throughout the Sierra. There are not scores of rivers that would provide the kind of needed water supply that we have in this state to meet our current and future population. And so while I recognize that actions have been taken over the years that would make it harder, obviously, for any kind of future water storage in the canyon, I can't support going down that path with this resolution. I appreciate the resolution, the sentiment behind it, but I can't support it.
Thank you for your comments. Supervisor Wygant.
Just connect to some of your comments, Kirk. Respect your position. I'm going to go ahead and vote for this motion today. If it actually literally said it was opposed to, at any time in the future, the creation of an Auburn Dam or any storage facility in proximity, I'd be with you, but things have changed and the dam's not going to be built tomorrow for sure. Certainly the resolution that articulates the economic benefits of the value of the canyon. From a statewide perspective, I completely share your concerns, and I think over time things will change, and we need to be cognizant of that. And our goal, of course, is to make sure that what does happen is good for the county as a whole. But I really want to say I appreciate your comments, and can't say I completely disagree with them. I'm going to vote for the motion.
Thank you, Supervisor Wygant. Supervisor Duran.
No, I pretty much agree with what Robert just said. I don't see anything here in this document that restricts anything from happening. And an example, 7 years ago, the environment was different, and there could have been a deal on the table. There isn't a deal on the table right now, but that could change in 7 years. So who knows?
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's input on this. And thank you all for coming. All right, we are going to move to our 9:10 timed item. This is a county executive item regarding the Bickford Ranch specific plan. Excuse me. We have a number of items here relating to zones of benefit, and then also the specific plan final large lot map. I am going to go through these one at a time. We will be conducting a number of public hearings on this, and we will begin with the Board of Supervisors listening to a presentation on County Service Area 28, Zone of Benefit 183 Sewer. So I am going to call this specific plan item to our board and ask for a staff report from Michelle Kingsbury. Welcome.
Good morning, members of the board. We'll follow a similar format today with the Bickford Ranch specific plan as we did with Riola Vineyards that we took up a few meetings ago. These are implementing actions related to the Bickford Ranch specific plan, and we'll go through each one at a time and make it pretty quick for you. So the first item up, as Chair Montgomery mentioned, was for the sewer service area. This is County Service Area number 28, Zone of Benefit 183. With the Bickford Ranch specific plan in 2015, when we amended the specific plan, the last item before you today is your consideration for the large lot final map. These actions are necessary in order for you to consider the large lot final map, and it's a condition of approval for that. I'm going to catch up to my notes real quick. Bear with me. When the specific plan was first approved, there were 4 county service area zones of benefit that were required. They were established back in 2007. We have zone of benefit 183 for sewer, 184 for parks, I'm going from memory, 189 for fire and emergency services, and 188 for roads and drainage. Each of these will require some form of an action today. Because the new large lot final map, which is the subject of the final action today, will merge the lots created on the 2007 final map and re-subdivide the property in accordance with the 2015 amendment to the specific plan, these zones of benefit do require either amendments, or for zone of benefit 188, we'll look for a dissolution and establishment of a new zone of benefit 227. So the first item before you today is zone of benefit 183 for sewer. This will provide for a new assessment of approximately $4,668.20 per taxable large lot parcel. This will be in effect prior to the facility staff bringing forward at a later date an ordinance which would establish the sewer service charge for the residents. We can go into further detail if you like. Engineer reports have been prepared and signed by an engineer. Those are on file with the clerk of the board. They provide the background and documentation related to the establishment of these assessments and how they'll be split up. We can go through each one, or if you want me to do a real quick summary of all of them.
How about a quick overview of all of them?
All right, we'll move on to the next one. The second item on your for your consideration today is zone of benefit 184, which is for parks, trails, trailhead parking, as well as median landscaping maintenance. This amended zone of benefit would establish an assessment of $286.28 per taxable large lot parcel. The third item on your agenda is for consideration of amendment of zone of benefit 189, which is fire and emergency services. This amended zone of benefit would establish an assessment of approximately $633.79. The last zone of benefit item, on your agenda is for zone of benefit 188. This is for roads and drainage. Due to the configuration of the large lot map as well as the specific plan amendments that were brought forward back in 2015, this zone of benefit requires dissolution and establishment of zone of benefit 227, which would be for roads, drainage, as well as streetlight maintenance. I think the charge is $218 for the assessment on that one. It's worth mentioning at this time, in the spring, I think we anticipate bringing forward the small lot map. During that time, we're currently working with the property owners related to establishment of community facilities district for services. When we bring forward the small lot map, we'll look to dissolve both zone of benefit 184, 227, and 189 and roll those into a community facilities district. 183 for sewer would remain in effect at that time, so this is kind of an interim measure until we bring forward the small lot map. A lot of the information that we've pulled together through the engineer's report will kind of translate over, so it's not for nothing to do this process. A lot of the information that we worked through with the property owner will carry forward to that community facilities district as well. With that, our subject matter experts are behind me. We've all worked pretty hard to kind of come up with this solution to keep moving forward the large lot map, but certainly we're all available to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, before I open the public hearings on this, which will be sequential on each of the items, I'm going to first come to the board and ask if there are any clarifying questions that the board has on this. Okay, I see none. So I will declare that this is the public hearing in this Board of Supervisors proceedings on the amendment to zone of benefit number 183 in County Service Area 28 for sewer services. The hearing is to inquire into the amendment of this zone of benefit and the revision of the assessment on parcels within said zone to provide sewer services to the Bickford Ranch specific plan area. Any interested person may protest orally or may submit a written protest to the clerk during the public hearing. Interested persons may protest against the amendment of this zone of benefit or the proposed charge. Any protests pertaining to the regularity or sufficiency of the proceedings must be in writing and must clearly state the irregularities and defects to which objection is made. Any written protest not personally presented by the author of that protest at the hearing must be filed with the clerk at or before the beginning of the hearing. All protests and any requests to withdraw a protest must be received prior to the end of the public hearing. Does anyone wish to file written protests? If so, they must be filed with the clerk of the board now. Okay, I see no one who wishes to file a written protest, so the hearings are now officially opened. If anyone wishes to provide comments, has questions, or any oral protests on items 1 and 2, please step forward. After this, I will ask the board if any members have any questions or comments or need clarification from staff on items 1 and 2. When all comments have been received, the hearings will be closed. Is there any member of the audience that would like to make comments, questions, or a verbal protest on items 1 or 2? Okay, I see none. How about board? Oh, I see one.
Just a question. When you say 1 and chair, are you 1 and 2? Are you referring to 183 and 184?
Karen, can we get a clarification on that?
This is just regarding 183. That's zone of benefit 183. It's items 1 and 2 on the overhead.
Yes. Any other questions, comments, or protests from any member of the audience? Okay, I'll bring this back to the board. Any questions or comments on items 1 and 2? I see none. All right. I will then close the public hearing on this particular item. The hearing is closed. At this time, I ask the clerk of the board to announce the tabulation of ballots.
We received 1 ballot with 88 parcels listed, all in favor.
All right. Thank you very much. The results of the election is unanimously in favor of the amendment of Zone of Benefit number 183 in County Service Area 28 and revising the charges imposing an initial annual assessment of $4,668.20 per taxable large lot for sewer maintenance plus an annual cost of living modification. We now need to consider the resolution in item 2, which you see up on the PowerPoint. This is a public hearing in this Board of Supervisors proceedings on the amendment to Zone of Benefit number 184 in county service areas. Oh, I'm sorry.
Chair, we need action on that resolution.
Oh, I am
before you
so
move
sorry.
on.
I jumped right through that. All right. What's the pleasure of the board? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I beg your pardon, gentlemen. All right. We will now move to County Service Area 28, Zone of Benefit number 184, Park Services, items 3 and 4. This is the public hearing in this Board of Supervisors proceedings on the amendment to Zone of Benefit number 184 in County Service Areas 28 for park, trail, and landscape maintenance, administration, and park and trail development. The hearing is to inquire into the amendment of this zone of benefit and the revision of the assessment on parcels within said zone to provide park services to the Bickford Ranch specific plan area. Any interested person may protest orally or may submit a written protest to the clerk during the public hearing. Interested persons may protest against the amendment of this zone of benefit or the proposed charge. Any protests pertaining to the regularity or sufficiency of the proceedings must be in writing and must clearly state the irregularities and defects to which objection is made. Any written protest not personally presented by the author of that protest at the hearing must be filed with the clerk at or before the beginning of the hearing. All protests and any requests to withdraw a protest must be received prior to the end of the public hearing. Does anyone wish to file written protests? If so, they must be filed with the clerk of the board now. Is there any written protest? Okay, I see none. The hearings are now officially opened. If anyone wishes to provide comments, has questions, or any oral protests on items 3 and 4, please step forward. After this, I will ask the board if any members have questions or comments or need clarification from staff on items 3 and 4. When all comments have been received, the hearings will be closed. Is there any member of the audience who would like to comment, question, or protest? All right, seeing none. Any board member? Seeing none. I am then closing the hearing. This hearing is closed. At this time, I ask the clerk of the board to announce the tabulation of the ballots.
One ballot received with 88 parcels, all in favor.
The results of the election is unanimously in favor of the amendment of the zone of benefit number 184 in County Service Area 28 and revising the charges imposing an annual assessment of $286.28 per equivalent dwelling unit plus an annual cost of living modification. What's the pleasure of the board? We have a motion and a second. This is a roll call. I'm so sorry. Roll call.
Duran. Wygant. Holmes. Euler. Montgomery.
Yes. All right. We now need to consider the resolution of item 4. This is County Service Area 28, Zone of Benefit number 189, Fire and Emergency Services. Agenda items 5 and 6. This is the public hearing in this Board of Supervisors proceedings on the amendment of Zone of Benefit number 189 in County Service Areas 28 for Fire and Emergency Services. The hearing is to inquire into the amendment of this zone of benefit and revision of the assessment on parcels within said zone to provide fire and emergency services to the Bickford Ranch specific plan area. Any interested person may protest orally or may submit a written protest to the clerk during the public hearing. Interested persons may protest against the amendment of this zone of benefit or the proposed charge. Any protests pertaining to the regularity or sufficiency of the proceedings must be in writing and must clearly state the irregularities and defects to which objection is made. Any written protest not personally presented by the author of that protest at the hearing must be filed with the clerk at or before the beginning of the hearing. All protests and any requests to withdraw a protest must be received prior to the end of the public hearing. Does anyone wish to file written protests? If so, they must be filed with the clerk of the board now. I see no one wanting to file a written protest. So the hearings are now officially opened. If anyone wishes to provide comments, has questions, or any oral protests on items 5 and 6, please step forward. After this, I will ask the board if any members have questions or comments or need clarification from staff on items 5 and 6. When all comments have been received, the hearings will be closed. Are there any questions, comments, or protests from the audience?
Mike Arabedian, Placer Group Sierra Club. I'm a little confused. I thought we were on 3 and 4, but now you're asking for 5 and 6. Could you?
We already moved through 3 and 4.
Okay. Well, the Placer Group has 2 concerns about this item, the fire and emergency services. One is a historical note, and the other one has to do with the nature of the fire hazard to the seniors who would be living here on these ridges. First of all, historical note, this area was, prior to this, it was in the Penryn Fire District, and when it was taken out of the fire district to go into the county fire, that was a significant loss of potential resources to support that district, and more recently, the voters in that district voted to tax themselves more. Secondly, from our own fire experience, starting with especially the King Fire that jumped 17 miles in one day and threatened a number of communities, we have the drought, the recent fire in Sonoma County, but historically the Bowles Fire and other fires that have swept through communities. And we have the fires going on right now. There's no question this is an expansion of the wildland-urban interface that will place people in harm's way that are located in some parts of this subdivision. So our concern is something we hope that the developer would address and bring fire prevention principles to bear on the redesign so that it is not such a danger. I know it's stated that there are lesser traffic problems because there will be older population there, but that's exactly the problem that we hope they would address and reconfigure to make this safer for the residents from the hazards of wildfire. And perhaps you may want to help encourage that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other member of the public who would like to comment, question, or protest on these items, 5 and 6? Okay, I see none. Any board member questions, comments? I see none. I'm going to close this public hearing. The hearing is closed. At this time, I ask the clerk of the board to announce the tabulation of the ballots.
1 ballot received, 88 parcels, all in favor.
The results of the election is unanimously in favor of the amendment of Zone of Benefit number 189 in County Service Area 28 and revising the charges imposing an annual assessment of $633.79 per equivalent dwelling unit for fire and emergency services, plus an annual cost of living modification. We now need to consider the resolution in item 6. What is the pleasure of the board? We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Duran. Yes. Wygant. Yes. Holmes. Yes. Euler. Montgomery.
Yes. All right. We are now going to move to County Service Area 28, dissolution of Zone of Benefit number 188 and establishment of Zone of Benefit 227, roads, storm drainage, and street lighting maintenance services. This is agenda items 7 and 8. This is a public hearing in this Board of Supervisors proceedings on the petition by landowners for the dissolution of Zone of Benefit number 188 and the establishment of Zone of Benefit number 227 for roads, storm drainage, and street lighting and maintenance services. The hearing is to inquire into the dissolution of Zone of Benefit number 188 and the establishment of Zone of Benefit number 227 and the setting of an assessment on parcels within said Zone 227 to provide road, drainage, and lighting maintenance services to the Bickford Ranch specific plan area. Any interested person may protest orally or may submit a written protest to the clerk during the public hearing. Interested persons may protest against the dissolution of Zone of Benefit 188 or the establishment of Zone of Benefit 227 or the proposed charges. Any protest pertaining to the regularity or sufficiency of the proceedings must be in writing and must clearly state the irregularities and defects to which objection is made. Any written protest not personally presented by the author of that protest at the hearing must be filed with the clerk at or before the beginning of the hearing. All protests and any requests to withdraw a protest must be received prior to the end of the public hearing. Does anyone wish to file written protests? If so, they must be filed with the clerk of the board now. I see no one coming forward to file a written protest. The hearings are now officially opened. If anyone wishes to provide comments, has questions, or any oral protests on items 7 and 8, please step forward. After this, I will ask the board if any members have questions or comments or need clarification from staff on items 7 and 8. When all comments have been received, the hearings will be closed. Is there anyone who has question, comment, or protests on this items 7 and 8? Okay, I see none. Any board members, questions or comments on items 7 or 8? I see none. This hearing is closed. At this time, I will ask the clerk of the board to announce the tabulation of ballots for dissolution of Zone of Benefit 188.
One ballot received, 88 parcels, all in favor.
The results of the election is unanimously in favor of the dissolution of Zone of Benefit number 188 in County Service Area 28. At this time, I will ask the clerk of the board to announce the tabulation of ballots for the establishment of Zone of Benefit number 227.
One ballot received, 88 parcels, all in favor.
The results of the election is unanimously in favor of the establishment of Zone of Benefit number 227 in County Service Area 28 and imposing an annual assessment of $218.00 per equivalent dwelling unit for roads, storm drain, and street light maintenance, plus an annual cost of living modification. We now need to consider the resolution of item 8. What is the pleasure of the board? We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Duran. Wygant. Holmes. Euler. Montgomery.
Yes. All right. Our last item does not require a separate public hearing. So I will just ask the board if they have any questions or comments on items 9, 10, and 11 on the agenda, which is authorizing the chair to sign the Bickford Ranch large lot final map, approve and authorize the chair to sign the subdivision monumentation agreement, and approve the recordation of the final map and agreement. I see no questions or comments from the board. Is there any member of the public who has a question or a comment on these items?
Good morning, Mike Garabedian, Placer Group Sierra Club. Three kinds of comments on this having to do, again, with the fire prevention, which doesn't look like it's been incorporated in the EIR documents, the EIR supplement, in the way that is the county and CAL FIRE are doing now at this time. First of all, the layout of the lots could benefit from design, as I mentioned earlier, to help alleviate fire hazard and evacuation problems. It looks like it has very few entrance and exits, and that should be reviewed. Something that should be assured is that the State Board of Forestry adopted new fire operation type regulations for passing zones and things like that on the roadways. And we want to make sure, if this was approved before that those regulations will be applied as this is built out.
Thank you for your comments. Any other members of the public have a question or comment on this item? Welcome. Please come forward.
Good morning, Chair Montgomery, members of the board. George Phillips here this morning on behalf of Westland.
Not evening quite yet.
I apologize for my voice up front. I've made jokes about nothing better than a lawyer losing his voice, but I won't do that again. In response to the comments you just received, one thing that's important for the public really to mention is that this is a final map before you. There's no opportunity to provide any additional conditions of approval to the approved tentative map. But to address the gentleman's concern, Bickford does have in its approvals a specific easement that runs along the rear of all the lot lines on the ridges in particular for fuel management and fire prevention. So this issue was taken into account by your staff originally through the process on the project and incorporated that easement for the specific purpose of fire prevention. So I just wanted to add that to the record so that you feel comfortable that that issue has been addressed in the matters before you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. It's a pleasure. We have a motion and a second on items 9, 10, and 11 on our agenda. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. That completes our 9, 10 timed item. We are now going to move to our 9:30 timed item. This is a Health and Human Services item regarding the Public Health Laboratory Services study results. We will be receiving an update on the Placer County Public Health Laboratory and a study into the feasibility of the transition of the Public Health Laboratory Services to a regional public health laboratory model. And we will be asked to authorize the Director of Health and Human Services to develop proposals concerning the operation of the Public Health Laboratory Services, including negotiating contractual proposals with regional public health laboratories to later present to the board for approval and direction. Presenting today will be Jeff Brown and Dr. Oldham.
So good morning, Chair Montgomery, members of the board. Jeff Brown, your Health and Human Services Director. I'm accompanied this morning by Dr. Rob Oldham, our Public Health Director and Public Health Officer, and Dr. Craig Lindquist, a consultant with Pacific Health Consulting Group, who has conducted an analysis of our public health lab. So this morning, we will be presenting you with the findings of Dr. Lindquist's analysis, listing a number of options we can pursue as we move forward to identify the best long-term sustainable model to meet the public health service lab needs of our county. The presentation will highlight the decreasing demand for lab testing and the extreme difficulty of running a very low-volume lab in a cost-effective way. Finally, we are recommending that our department move forward to negotiate an agreement with a larger regional lab. Any such proposed agreement would be brought to your board for consideration sometime early in 2018. So now I invite Dr. Oldham to continue with our presentation.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Chair Montgomery, members of the board. I'll give about a 15 to 20-minute summary, and then I wanted to hand off and let Dr. Lindquist make some comments. So I'll have a PowerPoint presentation just to summarize some of my thoughts. So first, let me start with some background of why we, background around the public health lab. Many people, aren't aware of what the public health lab does and public health lab services. And I say, ideally, public health, a lot of our functions, the public doesn't necessarily need to know about. We function in the background when things are running well. But public health laboratory services really are a critical kind of core function of public health. So assuring that we have access to those laboratory services is imperative, and my duty as health officer to protect the health of Placer County. And here in Placer County, our public health lab, we actually have a unique, proud tradition going back to the 1950s of having an outstanding public health lab. I think our staff are really fabulous. Some counties who are in the run public health labs struggle to hire staff. We've been very successful here, not just currently, but over the years. So we have a number of alumni of our program who are well respected in the public health laboratory community, and our current staff deliver great customer service. So when we do interact with the public, I feel like we provide a great level of service. But in that context, and this is really not new pressures, but we've been experiencing mounting pressures on the current public health laboratory model, particularly for lower volume counties, public health laboratories like ours in Placer. What are those mounting pressures? And I believe in Dr. Lindquist's report, which board members have, he outlines many of these, but just to name a few, changes in laboratory technologies and economies of scale. So especially give advantage to larger labs that do get larger volumes of samples and therefore can process many samples at the same time with marginal increases in labor and other costs. Changes in our healthcare system and reimbursements, particularly with managed care. Often our clinics, we go to them and encourage them to send labs if they don't have a choice. In fact, when we were in the clinic business, for people who had managed care, often we didn't have a choice where to send those tests to. Many of us in our own personal health experience this, where we have to go to a certain lab. That's where our insurance companies dictate. Rising professional standards, including a requirement for public health lab directors to have a doctorate education, and also extensive time experience in local public health laboratories. Increasingly over the last decade, we've seen more and more cooperative and regional models of county-based services for public health labs offering alternatives. So I did my training in Virginia, where it was only a single lab. So there are lots of different models around the state, and California, I think, is unique in that we haven't had more regional models over the years, but certainly within the last decade, we're seeing more and more of those regional models popping up. And then finally, kind of two mounting pressures that are in some ways specific to Placer County. Significant reductions in discretionary revenues we've seen, and we'll talk more about this, reduction in health realignment dollars that have come with the new funding formula under the Affordable Care Act. So less and less, the savings that the state took back from the Affordable Care Act has diminished our local health realignment, which was one of the major sources of revenue for our public health lab. And then finally, aging laboratory facilities. As you know, we have our public health labs in the barracks at the county government center, 70 plus years old building, and eventually will need to be replaced. So as a result of these mounting pressures, we have seen a dramatic reduction in the number of tests being performed and the number of samples that we receive. A dramatic increase in the cost per test. So many of the costs are kind of sunk costs or fixed costs that we have to have in place just to run a public health lab. And so therefore, with the decrease in volume, the cost per test has gone up. And then steady increases each year in the percentage of our public health discretionary revenues that must be used to support our public health lab. Just to talk about the reduction in the testing volume, and this is of no fault to anyone in our public health lab, and actually, or in our community. As I mentioned, we talked to different clinics and hospitals about sending more tests to our lab, and this is just if we look at this graph at any county in California, we would see similar trends. But you'll see kind of starting off at and this is test volume. There's also, I know members of the board received an email last night kind of calling into question some of these numbers, because you can also look at this would be the number of test samples that we received. There's also on some samples we do, for instance, gonorrhea and chlamydia, we'll do multiple tests per sample. But the trend line, kind of regardless, looks very similar, that we saw a reduction from 35,000 at the peak down to really under 5,000 currently is our number of samples per year. And then we look at the what other counties and regional labs are doing. You can see here, this slide looks at the different laboratories in the region, including the Marin lab that Dr. Lindquist can talk about, and the testing volumes at those labs versus the number of staff, full-time equivalents, FTE, involved in those labs. And you can see that the number of tests performed per staff for our lab, we're one of the lowest volume labs in the region, and we still retain many of our staff. I will point out that the 7.0 FTE that you see here in the lab is a reduction over the last couple of years. So we've had some positions that we haven't filled. We moved some clerical staff away from the lab. So I believe at one point we had 9.5 FTE in the lab. So this is as a reduction, but even with those reductions, we still have very low numbers of tests performed per staff. I also believe you got an email indicating that there's some question about including other staff in these numbers, but not all these FTE perform tests. I would just say that's the case, I believe, and Dr. Lindquist can also speak to this for all the different labs, that when they were asked how many lab staff are in their cohort of laboratory staff, that included these other staff who may not be conducting tests themselves. And so then I'll turn to the analysis that Dr. Lindquist performed. In fact, when we looked at some of these trends, Jeff and I talked to colleagues around the state and really asked them, what would you recommend here? Some other counties have been through this, and one name kept coming up, and it was Dr. Lindquist's name is someone who's highly respected from our state public health director, our state lab director, many other health officers in the region, particularly in the Bay Area. All really had high levels of respect for Dr. Lindquist. I'll tell you more about him in a few minutes. So he began work on this. Your board approved the contract with him and Pacific Health Consulting Group, and began work in February of 2017. We shared that scope of work with all the staff in the laboratory, in fact, with the whole public health division. Got extensive, actually collected the data. Dr. Lindquist, his methodology included giving data requests to our lab, but also to other labs in the region, getting extensive input from all of our public health lab staff, including 3 on-site visits where Dr. Lindquist met with the staff as a group, but also gave an opportunity for each staff individually to express concerns to him. He also conducted more than 25 various stakeholder interviews. So talked to stakeholders from lots of different communities, including the medical community, hospitals, but also parks and fire and lots of other people. And then we actually along the way had lots of opportunities, shared initially, I believe, a meeting back in September where we really tried to have the final facts agreed upon and sat down and shared, these were the facts that, as far as data that we received from the lab, and fed that back. But then he shared his draft report with us and with the public health lab staff at a November 9th meeting, and then the final report was shared in early December. As part of that report, as I mentioned, initially it was really looking at the facts, and that transitioned the analysis into looking at the options back in September. And the three options that Dr. Lindquist analyzed were, and I have them here on the slide, option 1, retaining our current model of local public health laboratory services. Option 2, retaining the model with making some modifications. And option 3 is it would be a regional public health lab service model with another county being kind of the regional lab, and us closing our Placer Public Health Lab. Each of these options was evaluated with respect to community impact, feasibility, and financial impact. As far as option 1, certainly, and that's retaining the current model, he found, and we agree, that would preserve our very high level of customer service with our lab that we currently enjoy. Also would preserve positions for, we have outstanding staff, and would let them stay in their current positions. But the challenges would include, would still need a new or different facility within 2 to 5 years, which our senior architect estimated would result in a capital outlay of approximately $7 million. It would also require, besides the capital outlay, increasing investments of county general fund to support ongoing operations of this model, which we would estimate, based on at least the past, of $1 to $2 million of county general fund, additional county general fund per year to support the public health lab. Which I would say, we just completed our first community health assessment and community health improvement plan in the last 20 years, and so lots of community feedback, and so there are a lot of other competing public health priorities. So if I had to come to this board asking for additional county general fund, I think it's a fair question to ask: is would we prioritize public health lab services versus other community priority issues for this community? So option 2, modifying the current model. So it really was found is unlikely to significantly increase, we're unlikely to significantly increase the volumes or the revenues. I mentioned kind of us already going out and trying to beat the bushes and encourage some of our clinics to send us more tests, our hospitals to send us more tests, and really, unfortunately, that business is not coming back. As I mentioned, with managed care, there are commercial labs such as Quest and LabCorp that have contracts with these clinics and hospitals or with the managed care plans, and they have to send to those places. Marginally, perhaps there are some tests that we could get back, but for the most part, we can't. And then as far as the revenues, the fees are set. We could adjust the fees every year. We come to the board with a fee schedule, and we could adjust that fee schedule, but it's unlikely to significantly impact the revenues that the lab receives. And then the second point, I think, we are in some ways function as a regional lab, and that we do the testing for a number of other counties, but we've really struggled to get those counties to pay certainly the full cost. They're paying maybe the marginal costs. We're getting maybe $10,000 per county. So this is Sutter, Nevada, and Yuba County. But there are real challenges in collecting the full cost, particularly without something like a formal joint powers authority. And also when we look at other options, that these partners, we know those counties, they have less discretionary revenue from health than we do. In fact, Jeff used to be the director at Nevada County, knows their budgets pretty well, and so they're likely to move to other more economical options if given the opportunity to contract with a high volume lab that has lower cost per test. And then I'll say on the third point, we could make some additional staffing reductions. I would estimate 1 to 2 FTE would certainly be possible, given our reducing testing volume. As I mentioned, we've already made some staffing reductions just through attrition over the last couple of years, and those were painful, just on the impact on staff morale and capabilities. The feedback I got, people weren't exactly happy with those, but I think we could seriously look at further reductions in FTE, but there'll be trade-offs with that on the capabilities, on having to lay additional employees off. And then even when making those reductions, we found that it would only reduce the costs by maybe 10 to 20% in making those staffing reductions. And then finally, the option two, one of the problems with that is the rehab of the old building. That was one of, and I'll get to the lab. One of the proposals from the lab was to move into the former medical clinic building. That is likely to also be costly, although not as costly as building a new building, and then not really an ideal long-term solution. So we could get a few more years out of a model like that, but that's really the question: is what would be the long-term solution for our lab? And I mentioned, so there's a proposal that was brought forward by our lab staff, which they termed the bare minimum lab. And so I wanted to provide a summary of that. I would say under option two, there are lots of different permutations of what that might look like as far as making some reductions, increasing revenues, asking more of our partner counties, but also making some cuts to our expenses. But this is the one brought forward by our public health lab staff. And it included reducing all the lab staff down to 32 hours per week. We actually have one staff member who voluntarily wanted to do that. So for the other 6 staff, they had said that they would be willing to do that, to reduce down to 32 hours a week, and kind of propose that. Eliminating our microbiologist training program, drastically reducing our travel training and equipment budget, and then diverting grant funds from travel training and equipment. These would be California Department of Public Health grant funds in order to pay for salaries, so kind of moving them around. I'll say that would require California Department of Public Health approving that redirection of funds, but is a possibility. And then obviously with that type of model, as I mentioned before, facilities challenges would remain. But assuming all of that, so assuming that we could redirect those funds in that way, the maximum amount of savings that I would estimate we would get out of that would be $250,000 a year. More realistically, it's probably in the $100,000 to $150,000 a year, principally because just reducing the staff, as you know, doesn't save us anything on benefits. So we would reduce a little bit in our salaries, but there would be no benefit reduction there. So finally, option 3, closing the Placer Public Health Lab and joining a regional lab. Both the Sacramento County Public Health Lab and the Solano, Napa, Yolo, Marin Public Health Lab appear to be a feasible option according to Dr. Lindquist's analysis. They appear to be feasible alternatives, and they indicated that they could handle all of our entire testing volume and preserve all of our existing public health lab services if we were to contract with them. We may, those labs, particularly the Solano, Napa, Yolo, Marin lab, it's in Fairfield, so there's longer transit times to get to those labs, but not necessarily longer turnaround times for results. So that's all would be potentially negotiable within a contract as far as parameters for turnaround times. It would be likely to result in significant savings if we were going to do that. I can't put a number on that. That would really depend upon what type of arrangement we could negotiate, but would estimate that in the realm potentially of $1 million per year, plus or minus a few $100,000. But this model, and this is, it was likely result in significant impacts to our public health staff, and that's why we don't really consider this lightly. To think about changing this model, I mentioned these are our public health lab staff are incredible employees, and it's painful for us to really consider this. But I really feel like it's my duty that we at least entertain this option and bring it to your board. And this next slide kind of points to one of the reasons why. That we're seeing, really, I mentioned before the decrease in revenues, particularly health realignment receipts. And you can see this graph, the blue line is the health realignment receipts over the last 5 years. And you can see the reduction, kind of erosion year to year, particularly in 2014 with the Affordable Care Act, where the savings, at least what we're supposed to enjoy from the Affordable Care Act, got redirected back to the state. We're in a 60-40 split where we had to divide up the previous health realignment levels. And so what we've been doing to kind of sustain core public health services is redirecting realignment from the social services sub-account, transferring that into public health. And we appreciate that we're part of an HHS department and we have that option. However, with the new changes that make this increasingly more difficult for our colleagues in social services to handle this, and specifically, and this slide kind of speaks to that, we're seeing there's a new funding methodology for in-home supportive services, and so it really makes us less and less able to divert social services realignment into public health. Also, I would just add that realignment revenues are cyclical, so they go up during the good times and down during the bad times. They're largely tied to vehicle license fees and sales tax revenues, but demand for these services is countercyclical. So during great recessions across HHS, we saw increasing in demand. So this is the relative good times. You see that dip that we've seen in revenues. And so I think it's prudent for us to think about if we were to have another recession, even a small recession, what would happen both to the revenues and also the demand for our services. So to summarize on the discretionary revenues, to continue our current model, like I said before, would need a significant increase in our county general fund support. So just in summary, why consider public health lab regionalization? In addition to the fiscal concerns that I've already mentioned, I think there are some immediate opportunities with expansion or opportunities that would come with regionalization. Diseases cross; they don't respect county lines. So there is, in talking with my colleagues, for instance, who work with the Solano regional lab, there's some value in having kind of a centralization and regionalization to see, to better surveil what's going on across county lines and working together more. We already do work together quite a bit, especially with Sacramento County, with Nevada County, with our partner counties, and this would just be a greater opportunity to do so. Certainly, with one of the threats for our low-volume labs is the fact that we have small numbers of staff, and during a large outbreak, we really have limited surge capacity. And so being able to contract with a high-volume lab with larger numbers of staff, with more equipment, would add additional surge capacity. And then in addition, these labs have more robust after-hours support. I'll say we have provided great service after hours. I know we had a case, I believe, on Easter Sunday where we came in and did a great job of turning around a measles test. But that really relies upon our managers, management for the public health lab being around and available, and that's really hard to do, and it's asking a lot of them. So far, we've been lucky, but some of the other counties actually have a more formalized on-call system because they have a larger number of staff to pull from. There are significant savings of increasingly limited public health discretionary revenues, as I mentioned, and regionalization really offers, I think, a more sustainable model for public health services in the long run. As far as, I mentioned we presented this multiple times, but I think especially after the November 9th meeting where we really laid out Dr. Lindquist's draft report, which talked more about option 3 as being a feasible option. I think your board began to receive some letters, and also there was at least one letter to the editor that I'm aware of from a former Placer Public Health Lab director. I received about 5 letters that were forwarded to me. There I'm sure were other letters, but the general, so most of those letters were not from Placer County residents. And all but one of those letters were actually from our current or former local public health lab professionals, including trainees or their family members. The general themes of those letters, and I won't go through all of the concerns that were brought up, but there was this repeated concern that this analysis and this process was expecting our public health lab to make a profit. And I just wanted to comment on that. Even that we were comparing our public health lab services to a commercial lab, and that wasn't really the intent or the what happened at all in Dr. Lindquist's report. I think we're very clear that we need dedicated public health laboratory services, and I would argue local public health, not just relying upon the state lab, but kind of a local public health lab services. and that we're not comparing our operations to commercial labs. We're actually comparing it, the potential to another county-run public health lab. There was a concern that our local public health lab would be closed and tests sent to a commercial or state lab. Again, not what we're considering before your board today. There's a concern that coordination with our Placer communicable disease control team would be negatively impacted if our public health lab were to be regionalized. On this, I think we do work very closely in our communicable disease team with the public health lab on a fraction of cases. So we receive about 3,500 reports of communicable disease per year. And of those, I think maybe on the order of 100 or so are positives that we receive from our public health lab. So the vast majority of the reports that we get are from other labs, hospitals, et cetera. But on those cases, I think it's fair to say we work very closely with our public health lab in getting immediate reporting and interpreting the results, et cetera. And I think that's a fair critique, is that we would need to develop similar relationships with a regional lab if we were to go in that direction. I will say most of those contacts are still, even though we're just down the hall, are by telephone. So I don't think there are a lot of physical barriers to doing that and having a lab further away, but it's something we would definitely need to work on developing those relationships. There was a concern that regional labs are not stable and that they're on the verge of closure. Even a mention that during the Great Recession in 2009, Sacramento County took a look at their public health lab and decided whether it's something they could afford doing. They had many of the same challenges that we're talking about today. So I think that's kind of the point. We're hoping that if we can provide additional revenues, I know, for instance, with Sacramento County, El Dorado County is now contracting with them, that maybe they can have additional revenues to make their labs more sustainable. But I think that's a fair criticism and concern that we would have to negotiate. The next point, concern that our regional public health lab would have longer turnaround times. Again, I think that's negotiable. It could be the case, but that could be negotiated in a contract. There's concern that not all current tests would be offered through a regional public health model. I think Dr. Lindquist's report, he hit on that very well, and that all of the tests that we are currently performing could be handled, at least with the two options that he considered. And then finally, there were concerns that a loss of our bioterrorism lab might impact our laboratory response network, the LRN. And actually, the next slide kind of speaks to the LRN, the Laboratory Response Network, which is really developed through the United States Department of Health and Human Services, CDC, so Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So they're really in charge of that LRN, and then they delegate that out to the state of California, California Department of Public Health to administer that. The LRNs are there. You can see the ones that are in California right now on the map. You see our Placer County Public Health Lab there. And the next slide, you can see kind of how those LRNs are distributed across the country. So one of the things you'll just see, I know it's a small slide, but that California has a very high concentration of LRN labs relative to other areas. So I mentioned, when I trained in public health and preventive medicine in Virginia, we just had one, and that functioned very well. You'll also see Supervisor Montgomery raised the concern about could Reno, they do have an LRN in Reno, could they be the LRN for this area, particularly for the Tahoe Basin? And it's possible. Ultimately, that would be up to the CDC and the California Department of Public Health. But again, you can see, and Dr. Lindquist may have some comments about this, but the usual LRN have, they're don't have to be so closely concentrated as they are in California at this point. So finally, Jeff already mentioned the action that were requested, and I won't read through that again, but essentially what we're just asking for today is for the authority for the Director of Health and Human Services to negotiate, to explore all the different models concerning operation of lab services, but to negotiate a contract with a regional public health lab to bring back to your board for approval and direction. With that, before I'll take your questions, I did just want to introduce Dr. Lindquist. I mentioned when I asked around, and Jeff and I asked around, everyone kept telling about this guy here to my right, and he is very impressive. So Dr. Lindquist completed his MD at the University of Iowa and his PhD in internal medicine residency at Yale, where he was co-founder of Yale's first HIV/AIDS outpatient services. He then moved to San Francisco to do a fellowship and then joined the faculty at UCSF, where he worked in the Moffitt HIV/AIDS clinic. In the early 1990s, Dr. Lindquist joined the Marin Department of Health and Human Services, where he developed a county-based HIV/AIDS clinic and supervised AIDS clinical trials. He was an investigator on a number of drug trials as well as a consultant to projects involving drug resistance and gene sequencing. After several years in that position, he assumed the position of medical director over all the county's medical services and periodically served as the county health officer at the same time. Near the end of his tenure as medical director, Dr. Lindquist's interests turned to issues in healthcare design, delivery, and costs. Those interests led to postgraduate programs at the UC Berkeley School of Business and the Harvard Business School focusing on issues related to healthcare. He used his training to conduct an analysis of the Marin County Public Health Lab, which helped to inform Marin's joining into the Napa Solano Yolo Marin Regional Public Health Lab. Dr. Lindquist subsequently retired from Marin County and is currently a visiting scholar with the Stanford Clinical Excellence Research Center and an adjunct professor of medicine at the Stanford University School of Medicine, in addition to doing some part-time consulting work for Pacific Health Consulting Group. One thing that's not in Dr. Lindquist's bio is that his home in Sonoma County burned down in the fires in early October. It's a testimony to Dr. Lindquist, his character, that he completed this analysis despite the personal tragedy and the ongoing challenges that he's having with recovery. I would like to personally thank Dr. Lindquist for agreeing to help us out on this analysis, for his well-earned expertise, his hard work, his professionalism and persistence, and most importantly, for the tremendous patience, respect, and sensitivity which he's treated our public health lab staff through this challenging process. So with that, Dr. Lindquist, you would like to say a few words, please.
Thank you, Rob. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you, Rob, for giving such an extraordinary overview of the work that I've been doing with the laboratory over the last several months. I'll not make an attempt to summarize it, and I also am acutely aware that there will be questions, and I will not try and anticipate those questions and welcome those comments. Instead, I would just like to do three things. First, I'd like to thank the staff and all of the members of the stakeholders in the community that have participated in this report. I was very aware, both based on my prior experience in Marin and certainly with the reputation or the history of the closure of the Marin laboratory, is that this would be a sensitive issue here for the Plosser group, and particularly for the Plosser staff. And I want to thank them individually and as a group for a high degree of professionalism. I think, too, that I want to emphasize both in this early comment as well as in the additional comments that the members of the stakeholders across from the state and the members of the community that made comments and input into this report all report a high regard for the Placer County Public Health Laboratory staff. You really should be proud of an extraordinary group of professionals. And they have contributed greatly and significantly over the course of many years. I would also have to say that the actual two themes that kept emerging in this report, again echoing my experience in Marin, are two things. First, the inevitability of change, and then the difficulty of making change. And I want to just pause for a moment and say something about each. The inevitability of change is essentially that whatever man-made makes, whether it's an enterprise or it's a business or it's a law or a regulation, sometime during the course of that enterprise or decision, changes occur. Sometimes the changes are intentional and they are the direct desire of that change, or sometimes they're unintentional and unexpected. And sometimes they are unrelated at all to an action. It comes from an externality. It comes from a market, it comes from an economics, it comes from a cultural change, a change in demographics and technology. It can come in many directions, but it does come. And this is part of a parcel of the story of this laboratory and its tremendous service to the community, is that things have changed. Technology has changed. The arrangements in terms of who delivers health care, how health care is being paid for, the demands for the tests and the types of tests have all changed. And it's not in any way reflect on the quality of the service or the dedication or the skill of the individuals doing the job. It is externalities that individually and collectively have created a significant change. There are times where things that have been, if you will, tailwinds, things that have assisted the local health departments to help in terms of preserving the safety and promoting the health of the community, have instead turned direction, and tailwinds have now become headwinds. Things that have been levers in the past have shortened, and other levers appear that become necessary and make difficult choices. I won't go into the detail. I think the report lays out the case of what some of those changes have been. But I think that it places the next question of why is it so difficult to change? You will find, as I did in Marin, that there will be strong opinions and debates and perhaps disputes around individual facts. And they will come from people who mean well and actually have a strong point. And in particular, my experience in government and government bureaucracies, and I'm sure members of the board can attest to this better than I, that changing government can be extremely difficult. And there is wisdom in that construction. Because what government does is oftentimes the only agency that can do something. And what government services do are of vital importance. So it should not be easy. It should be difficult. It should be done deliberately, carefully, and thoughtfully in a way that reflects the balances of all the changes. And I hope what you have found in this report and in the subsequent public comments and questions, that this process has been careful and it has been conservative and cautious in that regard. Because I think I speak for myself and I speak for Jeff and Rob as well. We understand the importance of these services. It is vital that public health laboratory services continue to be available and serve their purpose. And so change must be done thoughtfully. Because of that concern, that respect for the importance of these services, I've attempted to be even-handed and I've attempted to be cautious in proposing that there are alternatives and that confirmation of what I would call the feasibility study is the next step. And I think Rob and Jeff have appropriately placed the decision before the board is to look for confirmation of what I think that feasibility or possibility is before you make any concrete decision to close the laboratory or change. I think, too, that it's very important as you look at this to consider something that Rob touched on repeatedly, and that is that economics, that study or science of people's choices that they make in a universe of limited resources for which there's alternative uses, applies both to government and even these vital areas. Local health departments are time and again being asked today to make these difficult choices, choices that maintain those things that are most dear, most vital, but balancing them against the new challenges. And I think that what has been done, and I commend the department for its careful, deliberate choice and its inclusiveness of its staff to the extent possible, that this reflects a thoughtful and respectful process, and I hope a balanced outcome for you. But with that, I'll close my comments and allow the chair and the board to proceed as they desire.
Thank you so much. Dr. Oldham, did you have any other comments before I opened it up to any questions from the board?
No, thank you.
Okay. Jeff, anything? Okay. Supervisor Holmes.
Rob, thank you for your very detailed presentation. Reading through the staff report, I was looking at option 2 and seeing if there was any benefit in that. As I read further and listening to your comments today, it seems like you pretty well analyzed that as far as you could. Do you think it'd be any worthwhile to go any further looking into that option?
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Holmes. We have, besides, I mentioned the staff proposal for option 2. I didn't talk about kind of behind the scenes, and I think it's probably premature to kind of share what management has looked at, other options that obviously would require staff layoffs. So yeah, there are, like I said, lots of different permutations of that. I'll say the concern I have with that is at some point we start really cutting into sustainability, and so from a public health perspective, how bare minimum can we get, and then even if we were to cut back, say 4 or 5 FTE, there would still be significant costs involved with that. But at the same time, some of those concerns that I brought up around the surge capacity, for instance, those capacities would be diminished even further from their current state. So yes, and I'll say what we're asking for the board is to move forward with the opportunity, as Dr. Lindquist says, to see. We think that these regional opportunities are feasible, and to further develop those with having negotiations around contracting. But at the same time, we can further develop option 2, so that when we come back with your board, we'll have all of those options equally developed.
All right, thank you. I just want to thank Jeff and you, Dr. Oldham, for, I know this is a very sensitive issue and you've really given it a lot of careful consideration, and I appreciate the time you spent with me kind of explaining it to me, so I appreciate that, so thank you.
Any other board questions or comments? I don't see any lights, so I will open this up at this time to any member of the public that would like to address the board on this. If you have any questions or comments or anything you would like to bring forward, now is your opportunity. If you're interested in speaking, please come to the dais. Okay, I see no public comments, so I will bring this back to the board. Are there any other questions or comments on this presentation? Supervisor Duran.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing this item before us. To those folks that are from the lab, this is, again, as the doctor stated, this has really nothing to do with you personally. And I know that you take a lot of pride in what you do. You do a tremendous job. But at the end of the day, for us, as sitting elected officials, we have to determine the best bang for the buck, and we're beholden to our constituents to utilize their tax dollars in the most efficient and effective way that we can, and we have to make these hard decisions from time to time. We did it with services, culinary services. We've done it with landscaping services. We've done it with all different kinds of services here. This is a little bit, for me, a little bit heightened because of the public safety issue, but I can assure you from my perspective, you're not going to find anybody that is more attuned to the need for these types of services. I think it was the first year that I was here. I just come off the board of education in Roseville, and that's when we had the outbreak of H1N1, and I had no idea, what a public health laboratory was. And I'm coming off being responsible for 26,000 kids in the Roseville Joint Union High School District. So, I have a memory of that, as well as the folks here in Placer County. So, and I know that my fellow board members are of the same acumen, that this is a very important issue. Unfortunately, as it has come to pass with other departments, this is one of those things where we have to make a decision. Do we continue to go down the road as we are, or do we find an alternative? And I'm not 100% convinced that we need to go to another alternative, but I think that it's my responsibility to at least look at that. Whether or not we do go down that road, I'll have to be convinced at a later time. But I owe it to at least take a look at what those options are. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Any other questions or comments from the side of the board? Okay, I see none. My questions and comments on this are really pretty brief. Dr. Lindquist mentioned a couple of things that I think are sort of worth noting. He talked about, and I'm sorry I didn't get your exact language, I apologize, talked about basically balancing the needs around limited dollars. This is something we do all the time at the board, whether it's roads or parks or Veterans Hall buildings or Health and Human Services. But he also mentioned that, what you were looking for today was confirmation of the feasibility study. And I think that I would be interested in taking a look at option 2 and really confirming what we think we know about that, and potentially rolling in some of the suggestions around the bare minimum lab proposal that staff brought forward, so that when something does come back to the board, we really do have that confirmation of feasibility. I think just directing you guys to go off and just take a look at one thing today is very short-sighted. So I would hope that the board would be willing to look at a number of options for you to look at and review more closely. And I would certainly hope that would include option 2, modifying the current model, but also rolling some of those bare minimum lab proposals into it. Any other questions or comments from any member of the board? What's the pleasure?
Just that as I read the action requested, I don't think that in any way precludes what it is that you've just articulated. And so I think that by our board providing the direction as requested in your comments, I'm sure our staff will address that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure that was very clear in that, because the action does say proposals, plural. Mm-hmm. So what's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
Second.
I'm going to give that to Euler and Wygant. It was sort of a tie. Sorry, gentlemen. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. Okay, we are now going to move to our 10 o'clock timed item. This is a county executive item. This is the Capital Projects Advisory Committee update. Visitor serving capital projects to support implementation of the Tourism Master Plan. Erin Casey will be presenting. Welcome,
That's a
Erin.
mouthful. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Erin Casey with the County Executive Office. Here to present this item to you today. I will present this item in 3 parts. I'll go over that with you here just shortly. First, I'll start with an overview on the county and county partnership with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. I think this is important to set context to the additional items I'll be covering, including a status update on public meetings that we co-convened with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association in early November. These meetings were to focus on the Tourism Master Plan priorities, revenue strategies in Eastern Placer County, and the Capital Projects Advisory Committee. And some of the feedback we received from those meetings is included in the proposed committee that you see before you today. And then finally, we've requested board action on the proposed committee, asking your board to approve the formation of the committee to recommend Tourism Master Plan priorities to your board, including visitor serving capital projects consistent with the Tourism Master Plan. Before I get into this in great detail, though, I'd like to start by thanking members of the community. This has been an ongoing process for us. We've been engaged with members of the community since earlier this year. Many of those community members have met with county staff, resort association staff and board, and also members of your board. And so their feedback has been essential to us developing what you see before you today. So I know some of them are here in the room, some are up in Tahoe. So just want to extend our gratitude for the community's participation in this process. Also want to acknowledge our partnership with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. I think Cindy Gustafson, the CEO, is here today on behalf of the organization, so we appreciate the ongoing partnership with them and their efforts with Placer County to bring this forward to your board. And then finally, I'd like to say thank you to your board. We have been meeting with you over the last several months, looking to you for guidance on this, and so we do appreciate your feedback, and I hope that what you see before you today really captures what we've discussed and some of the guidance you've provided over the last several months. So, the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association partnership formed in 1995 as an outcome of the Tourism Development Master Plan. The organization implements a robust marketing plan that includes visitor information services as well as conference sales, among other sponsorship programs that they manage. And they did advise your board on transportation and capital projects as well. They've partnered with the community to engage the community on the Tourism Master Plan over the years, and it also includes the North Lake Tahoe Chamber of Commerce. Earlier this year, we began contract negotiations. On April 1st, county staff submitted a budget and scope of work, or desired scope of work, to the organization. And in that request, there were some significant changes to what we had done in the past. We're looking for a proposal on marketing services, but a limited proposal for capital project and transportation development, as your board may recall. On May 3rd, the Resort Association presented us with a counter proposal, and then on May 19th, county staff met with the Resort Association's executive committee and staff and determined that the best next step would be to engage in facilitated sessions to identify areas of alignment and to develop a future partnership. You can see there were several additional meetings that were convened to really work this through and identify next steps. And some of the things that we identified that were important at the time were around, okay, why do we think we need to proceed with some of these changes? We agreed that it was important to ensure that the community was represented on the committee that was recommending projects to your board. It was diverse and broad and represented the several groups that encapsulate all of Eastern Placer County. And so that was important to us. Ensuring that the process was streamlined and efficient in terms of vetting projects and bringing those forward to your board. Addressing any conflict of interest issues that we felt existed with the previous committee, and ensuring that the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association and Placer County continued to have a partnership working together on behalf of the community. Community feedback that we received during some of the earlier stages of these conversations include the following: to preserve the community voice. And I think that you'll see that the committee that we have before you today does in fact do that. There were concerns that by making changes to the partnership with the Resort Association, that there would no longer be opportunity for community members to weigh in on community needs or to recommend priorities to your board. I think you'll see within that committee that we've in fact captured that concern and addressed it. To slow the process of the proposed changes down, we did do that. If you may recall, we brought a 1-month and 6-month contract forward to your board with the Resort Association so that we would have time to convene these public meetings and formulate this committee and how it would work. To ensure transparency and accountability, maintain the partnership with the Resort Association, and then to continue public outreach on the process and the Tourism Master Plan. And that's what I'm here to share with you today, some of the outcomes of those public meetings.
And Erin, I'll just note that you missed one of your bullet points, which was to expand participation within Eastern Placer County.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very important one, in fact. So the partnership details that came out of our facilitated sessions included that we would work with the Resort Association to co-convene public meetings to review the Tourism Master Plan and its priorities. That plan was most recently approved by your board in 2015, and we felt it was important to engage the community around those priorities to see if things had changed, if that order of priority had changed, or if there's anything missing from the master plan that people felt we should be including and considering. We also agreed to co-chair the committee that you see before you today to review and recommend capital projects to your board, and then also review funding strategies The Tourism Master Plan currently identifies over $100 million in capital projects. And while we're making great strides each year to address those needs and implement those projects, significant funding gaps remain. And so we wanted to begin that conversation with the community around other revenue strategies that the community might be interested in, and then what would they like to see those funds allocated to. The press came to one of our first public meetings. That's what this captures here. You'll see on the right, I'm there. And then on the left, Adam Wilson is also there. He is the current chair of the Resort Association Board. This was actually a very important element of the public meetings that we convened. We wanted to ensure there was representation from both county staff as well as the Resort Association to engage and have conversations around these items. So just to give you a quick overview of the public meetings, we had 3 of them. They were convened in early November. We held one in Kings Beach, one in Tahoe City, and one on Donner Summit. We did this to ensure broad participation. The meeting objectives included reviewing Tourism Master Plan priority, and as I said earlier, wanted to ask the community, what's missing, what's next? How do we achieve some of our goals, understanding some of the challenges that we have. Developed the Tourism Master Plan Capital Projects Advisory Committee. So this committee has undergone several iterations and modifications, and so we wanted to bring what we had at that time forward to the community to see if there was anything that we might be missing. And the feedback we received there we have included. And then identify funding sources to implement the Tourism Master Plan. So the meeting format was, we started off with a quick 20-minute PowerPoint presentation that was given by myself and Cindy Gustafson. And then we had 3 stations where the community dispersed after watching the presentation to talk with county and resort association staff around these 3 areas. We also provided comment cards and feedback sheets so people could leave with us their feedback. They could share it with us personally, or they could leave it, which is where we were able to capture some of the data that we'll share with you today. So Station 1 was on the Tourism Master Plan, and we really focused in on the 4 focus areas identified within the plan. One is on visitor activities and facilities, and that focuses on trails, wayfinding, signage, snow removal, etc. Transportation, so expanding the TART services in our community, as well as bus shelters to support that service. Marketing services around destination marketing, conference sales, and visitor information and special events. And at the bottom, visitor information and support services. So now this includes a broad set of community priorities, including economic development, land development priorities, snow removal, traffic management, et cetera. So it's a bit of a catch-all for a variety of community needs. So these are a few graphs that we put together that reflect the Tourism Master Plan priorities by community, and these are by category as defined within the Tourism Master Plan itself. So on the left, you'll see in the blue, that represents transportation, and in the red, we have visitor information and support services. So in Kings Beach and in Tahoe City, they're fairly consistent there in the transportation and visitor information services in terms of priority. What's interesting from my perspective, though, is you note the Donner Summit area, that visitor information and support services ranked much higher than transportation did, or visitor activities and facilities, and I'll talk in a moment about why that is. But I also want to mention that marketing and sales, you'll see here, is also included in the Kings Beach and Tahoe City results. And when we talk about the Resort Association's marketing program, I want to add that it also includes visitor information services. It's far more expansive than what marketing program might lead you to believe. And so the results here actually show support for that program as well, because you can see that visitor information support services ranked very high. These are the Tourism Master Plan top 3 priorities that ranked within each community. And in Kings Beach and Tahoe City, you see again transportation ranking very high. So specifically, what does this include? This includes 30-minute service. People are quite interested in more frequent service in the community. Free transportation service ranked very high. Continuing to fund TART service was also included in that category. In the middle, in the blue there, you see economic development ranking quite high in Kings Beach and Tahoe City, and I'd like to add that that was specific to improved lodging. There was quite a bit of reference to that in the feedback sheets that we received around economic development activities. And then trails in the Kings Beach and Tahoe City area were also ranked quite high. Donner Summit, interestingly, is a bit different. You'll notice at the bottom there that economic development actually ranked very high in that community. And really the reference to economic development was different than what people in the Kings Beach and Tahoe City areas meant when they were talking about economic development. In the Donner Summit area, there's interest in infrastructure to support visitor services around a visitor center, restrooms, and parking. That community is really lacking in that area right now. Visitors come in off of I-80 into Soda Springs. Maybe this is your experience. You're not quite sure what's there. There's not a lot of signage, not a lot of parking, no public restrooms, and so there's a focus for that kind of economic development, those sorts of facilities in that community, which is unique from Kings Beach and Tahoe City. We also asked the community to provide us with any of their thoughts on priorities that aren't included in the tourism master plan, and so that's what this chart reflects. We combined it with all of the meetings, and so we didn't separate these out by community, but you see that housing ranked very high, probably not a surprise to your board to hear that. Recreation facilities, so skate parks or dance parks, or dance facilities was something that we heard, or indoor facilities where people could recreate in the winter if they didn't want to ski or the weather weren't very good. And then other transportation-related priorities, such as the Bay Area shuttle or hybrid and electric vehicles, that came up quite a bit also. So here's just a summary of the results. The top 3 priority categories were transportation, economic development, and trails. And as I mentioned already, the economic development priority areas were unique in Tahoe City, Kings Beach, or I should say Donner Summit was unique from the Tahoe City and Kings Beach feedback that we received. Station number 2 was on the Capital Projects Advisory Committee. I'll go through this quickly. There was, again, the community felt you need to continue to broaden that geographic representation and further diversify the committee. Interest in including small and large lodging, designated seats for SQUA and North Star, as well as an organization called the Donner Summit Association, and then adding additional areas of expertise around housing, environment planning, implementation, and public safety. Station number 3 on revenue strategies. We had several conversations with members of the community about this, and I'd say that the feedback we received sort of all across the board, willingness to consider a TOT extension or increase, or perhaps a T-bid, cross-jurisdictional T-bid, or just a larger, broader regional T-bid is what was reflected in the feedback sheets. Collecting TOT from properties listed on Airbnb and VRBO, which we are currently doing. A sales tax increase to support trails and transportation, gas tax, cannabis tax, and then some way to tax day trippers to Tahoe. So what do we do with all of this information? Well, the first thing we did is we included that feedback in the committee that you see before you today. And then I also wanted to point out some of the county initiatives that are currently underway that do address some of the other feedback we received, including the Parks and Trails Master Plan, the Housing Work Plan, and the Economic Incentives Program. We think that some of this feedback will also inform revenue strategies and potential voter surveys that we may choose to do here in the near future, as well as guidance on the committee that we're recommending to your board today. And now I will move on to the committee and talking with you briefly about committee objectives. So what is this committee tasked to do? The first is to recommend tourism master plan priorities to your board. It will also review capital project applications that come forward from the community, ensure projects are consistent with tourism master plan priorities, as well as leveraging state, federal, and local matching funds. This is something that we've been very successful at and want to continue with that. Hold public meetings to review projects and further engage the community, and then recommend strategies to implement these capital projects. And so it could be the case that the committee says, well, maybe we should be evaluating projects every 2 years, or perhaps there should be a threshold for projects that we evaluate on a 2-year basis, and then projects that we identify or review on an annual basis. Here is the proposed committee, and I think you have a copy of this in your board packet. You'll notice up at the top that the committee will be co-chaired by Placer County with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. There are 13 seats on this committee, and the committee will be making recommendations on visitor-serving capital projects directly to your board. You'll notice there, seat number 10, that we added a ski resort seat per the feedback that we received earlier in the public meetings, and we've identified which ski resorts would be appointing someone into that position down below. We've also added a lodging seat, which is seat number 11, again, in response to the feedback we received at the public meetings. We also have included as sideboards preference for one representative per organization. We did this to address some of the conflict of interest issues that we identified early in our discussions with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. Appointing organization must provide services in Placer County and also implement projects consistent with the Tourism Master Plan. And appointments may include board, staff, or community members. We'll leave it to the organizations to make that determination. Additional committee details, as I said already, participating organizations will represent businesses, residents, visitors, and implement projects consistent with the Tourism Master Plan. Members must live or hold a business license based in Eastern Placer County. The terms are actually staggered. There are 2- and 3-year terms to ensure committee stability. Eventually, all the terms will be 2-year terms. We just didn't want everybody coming off the committee at the same time. Meeting locations will rotate to ensure broad community participation, and all appointments will be approved by your board. Committee formation, just a quick schedule. The North Lake Tahoe Resort Association's Board of Directors approved the committee that you have before you today on December 6th. Today, your board will be taking action on the proposed committee, we hope. And then on the 15th, we will submit a letter to the organizations who are approved to appoint the members in late January. We'll also release the application for the at-large Resort Association and county appointed seats on the 15th, and we anticipate bringing the appointments forward to your board by February of 2018, with the committee then convening following that in late February. Also, I know there's been some interest in the grants process associated with this committee, so I just wanted to provide your board and the public with a bit of an update on that. Grant applications will be released in late December, and applications will be due in February. The committee's first meeting will be in February around the same time, so those two things will converge, and that's been our goal. We didn't want to delay the grants process as the committee was forming. Application review will begin March 2018, and we anticipate bringing projects forward to your board in late April or early May of 2018, ahead of the end of the fiscal year. I also want to add that we have received some additional feedback since we posted our staff report and the final proposed committee. The first is that to add the Squaw Valley Business Association to the list of organizations there that could appoint someone in the business association seat. Initially, we had excluded them because it was our understanding that they are very closely connected to Squaw Valley Ski Resort, and so their interests would be represented in that seat. But it's become clear to us, in light of the feedback, that that's not necessarily the case, and the organization would like to be acknowledged and participate and have the ability to appoint alongside the other business associations. And so that is something that staff has considered and would recommend that your board consider modifying or changing within the final committee. We also received some feedback on the Fire District, Placer County Sheriff's Office, and other emergency service personnel in participating. We felt it was important to look at all organizations and ensure that they were implementing projects, capital projects, consistent with the Tourism Master Plan. And so that is the reason why these organizations were excluded from the list of special districts that would be appointing someone. It is the case that they could review applications because all meetings will be public meetings, and we have the opportunity to share grant applications with them if they're interested in looking at them from that perspective. But we're certainly open to considering any modifications your board might like to consider in response to this feedback. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions that your board may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, Erin. Any questions or comments for Erin from any member of the board? I see no lights lighting up, so I will open it up to the public. Any member of the public? I'll start here in Auburn. Welcome.
Thanks, Jennifer, and members of the board. Cindy Gustafson, CEO of the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. And I wanted to just come out and again, thank Aaron for a very thorough presentation. I don't need to add to that, just to tell you that our board is in full support, as Aaron mentioned, and we really thank you and the county CEO's office and staff for the great relationship working through this from the time I started with the organization. So on behalf of our board, thank you very much, and happy to answer questions if there's other comments that come up.
Kirk.
Yeah, I do have a quick question, Cindy. So your board took action on the proposed advisory committee as it's represented in our packet, correct?
Yes.
And of course, that last slide showed possible additions. Your board has not taken a position on those possible additions.
No, and I did get a chance. I did try to reach out to our board chair because he represents North Star. Aaron briefed me on the Squaw Valley request, and obviously for those of you who don't know, the two largest corporations in the ski industry in the United States of America are on my board. So try to make sure that I'm talking to everybody in that. And he wasn't able to get back to me yet. So I don't know if North Star would have a similar request or not.
Right.
Some of their businesses are independent, others are not. So I'm sorry I can't.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear that what was adopted by your board is what is represented, absent those last suggestions we saw on the slide. Thank you very much.
But they were aware of some of those comments.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Other public comment? A familiar face. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair and the members of the board. My name is Pat Malberg, and I'm representing the Donner Summit Association. You saw it on the slide up there. It's a new organization, and we felt very strongly that we needed to be included in this whole conversation about TOT funding and all that. And we were so gratified with the fact that there was a meeting up at Donner Summit. Yay! And we all got to say our 2 cents, and much of it was included, and we're really grateful to Erin and her wonderful organizational skills, and to Jennifer for making this possible. We look forward to the process, to participating in it, and we hope we'll have a very exciting project to present to you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments here in Auburn? Okay, let me go to Tahoe. Any public comment on this in Tahoe?
Hello, Board of Supervisors, Madam Chair, JT Chevalier from the Tahoe City Downtown Association. And I just wanted to first come up and thank Placer County and the NLTRA for engaging our community in some rich dialogue and presenting that feedback to you. We are, as the Tahoe City Downtown Association, in full support of this committee structure and look forward to having this go forward. And in addition to that, we did receive some feedback from our Board of Directors, and they asked that the Board of Supervisors and the committee consider a minimum threshold in which the committee could possibly approve funding without maybe necessarily having to take it to the full Board of Supervisors for approval. But that was the only piece of feedback that we did not see reflected in the presentation. It's just because it came so late in the process. But once again, thank you, Placer County, Aaron, Jennifer, as well as Cindy Gustafson for engaging us as the business associations and including us as we develop this process moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, JT.
Madam Chair, before he steps
Supervisor
away.
Euler?
Yeah.
JT, please come back. Supervisor Euler has a question for you.
Yeah. Could you give us a for instance, I like the idea, or I'm intrigued by the idea that you raised of a minimum threshold that the committee could propose that would require board approval. Is there a proposed threshold associated with that? And can you give me a for instance of the kinds of projects or the kinds of expenditures that you think would fit within that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the minimum threshold that's been discussed, at least amongst our board, was between possibly $15,000 and $25,000 and below, in which could be approved for this committee structure. And these are kind of fall in lines with some smaller capital improvement projects that we might have in Tahoe City. Our gateway lighting in our downtown corridor could be one of those. It's small. It was about a $10,000 budget this year, and so kind of smaller items and capital projects that fall kind of under that threshold is more what we were considering in regards to that amount.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
JT. I think that was
Thanks.
Any other public comment there in Tahoe? Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Madam Supervisor, and the rest of the board for taking up this item. And I'd like to just say, I'd just like to commend the county on their work, Aaron and Cindy specifically, and just maintaining the local representation on the advisory board for how TOT funds are distributed. I'm glad to see that there's consistency between the makeup and structure of the CIT committee with the new proposed CAP committee. I think it's a good idea to have 2 seats available for special districts. I think that connects this process of distributing the TOT funds to elected officials, which reflects the will of the electorate, and so I think that that's a good addition. And with this, I'll just a heads up that our board will likely form a Parks and Rec subcommittee to better position Squaw Valley as well as the Public Service District to receive some of the TOT funds. And 2 other comments: just support the ongoing focus on the maintenance, snow clearing, and construction of new trails. And want to commend the late addition of the Squaw Valley Business Association to potentially sit on that board to advise how those funds are spent. Thank you.
And Mike, while I know who you are, I'm not sure everyone does. Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Sure. Mike Geary, General Manager of the Squaw Valley Public Service District.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public comment there in Tahoe on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will bring it back to Auburn. Any additional public comment on this item here in Auburn? Okay, I don't see any. Any questions or comments from any member of the board? I don't see any. I am just going to make a few comments on this. I'm really thankful for county staff and Resort Association staff for working so hard and so diligently on this and really working to expand the footprint of this proposed committee, both geographically but also in terms of interests. One of the reasons, or I would say actually the genesis of this coming forward, is that I was certainly getting feedback from certain interest groups and geographic regions that they didn't feel as if they were being included in the process that we had before. And was there some way to improve upon that process? And I think that's what we're seeing in front of us today. As to Supervisor Euler's question and clarification about what action did the Resort Association Board take, I appreciate your comments around the concern about adding something new that has not been vetted by the Resort Association Board. What I would like to suggest is that we move forward with adopting this today, but maybe ask the question: should we go back to the Resort Association Board to take that temperature as well as ours about adding some of these additional groups? I'll just tell you my thoughts on some of the proposals. I think potentially adding some additional business associations, whether it's Squaw Valley or North Star or others, does make some sense potentially. As to adding the first responders, whether it's PCSO or fire districts, they really don't work to implement the tourism master plan. And so while I think there is a very robust role for them to play in the public process, I don't think adding them to the board makeup makes any sense. And I say that as a wife of a Tahoe first responder, so sorry, honey, if you're listening. In terms of adding Department of Public Works and Facilities, the county has some opportunities, again, on that front. If we chose a county seat that we wanted to assign to, say, someone from DPFW, that's something we could do that way. So I think calling out a specific designated seat for them does not make sense. We do have opportunities around that. I think for future discussion, having some conversations both at the Resort Association, at our board, and with the committee around looking at some minimum thresholds makes some sense. I'm a little uncertain if 15 to 25K is a minimum that I would be comfortable with. It sounds like some big numbers to me, given that these are limited funds, and that many of them could get eaten up pretty quickly with a series of small projects that might never come in front of us. So I would like to see some more conversation around that before we moved forward with that. But those are all my comments. Supervisor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the threshold, sitting here thinking that through, I try to spend as much time as I can in the Tahoe region, being down here, representing down here. And it seems to me that we had a threshold and we weren't part of the decision that it would affect my ability to understand what's going on up in the Tahoe area. So that's just my initial comment regarding that.
Supervisor Euler?
Yep. First, appreciate everything that you identified in terms of how you would react to the proposal to add those 3 additional layers or additional points of input. If we are going to consider the Squaw Valley Business Association, are we considering simply adding them as one of the making them an additional business association that would be eligible to rotate into seats 1 and 2, as opposed to them having their own special seat? They would simply be an additional.
Yes, that would be the change. Yes.
Then I would, to Cindy's point, I would think it would be on us to also reach out to North Star, get their thoughts. If that were to be the case, I think it would be important to coordinate the rotations between the Business Association representation and the ski resort representation, so that in any given year you don't have 2 North Star or 2 Squaw Valley on there at the same time. And then as far as the threshold's concerned, perhaps it might make more sense, and I agree with your concern about not wanting to jump into that right now, given that it was kind of a late ad. I can see maybe a more important threshold than a dollar amount being a timeliness issue. Mm-hmm. You run up against something that the Resort Association folks all of a sudden say, oh my God, we just learned that this is going to happen in the next 2 weeks, and we really need to spend a few bucks in support of it or accommodating for it, and therefore they have, and our board wouldn't have the opportunity to meet and all the rest. They have the ability to make a decision on a timeliness basis, maybe as opposed to a dollar amount basis. So, but again, I think that's an important conversation for you folks to have, flesh that out, and then bring it back to our board to say this is our recommendation on how we be authorized to spend up to a certain amount based on these kinds of conditions.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Euler.
Supervisor Wygant.
And nothing to add except to emphasize that I was exactly where you were on the capital. Strikes me that capital projects tend to have a long lead time anyway, most of the time. But I hadn't thought through it enough to think about where we might want to have that quick response trigger. So I want feedback. It could be very well, maybe we have a combination of threshold and time frame. I don't want to pass up any great opportunities, but I'd like some more analysis on that, I think.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. And I can tell you that previously the Resort Association had allocated $100,000 for the CIT committee to consider when opportunities came up at other times of year. Those recommendations were still brought forward to your board, but it was still something that was exercised to accommodate for that. So I think we can do another level of analysis to see what might be appropriate, considering the fact that your board might not be approving something like that, and bring a recommendation forward for you.
Great, and just if I, just part that I didn't complete with my thought is because at the end, I think we just want to make sure that there's board accountability.
Yes.
But we don't need to take 6 months to pre-approve everything, and we want to be nimble, but make it clear that we're actually responsible for the public funds.
Right. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for that clarification. I think that's probably the most germane piece of this conversation, that these are public tax dollars that we're talking about and our obligation to make sure they are spent appropriately. And that is the oversight that we have at the end of the day. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, we're being asked to approve the formation of a Capital Projects Advisory Committee, including committee seats, eligible organizations, terms, and appointing organizations. I'm going to give that one to Holmes and Duran. Sorry, Wygant. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair,
Thank you
members
all
of the
very
board.
much for
Appreciate
coming.
it.
Much appreciated. Great work, everyone. All right, we are going to move to our department items. Department Item 5, Administrative Services, 2017 Information Technology Strategic Plan. Jarrett Thyssen, I hope I got that right, presenting. Was it close? Okay. Tyson? Thiessen. Okay. Sorry.
Jerry Gammas.
Jerry Gammas presenting.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Jerry Gammas, Director of Administrative Services, and with me is Jarrett Thiessen, our Deputy Director of Information Technology. I'll briefly introduce the item before your board today, and Jarrett will actually go through the presentation. The item before you this morning is requesting the adoption of the 2017 Information Technology Strategic Plan. This plan will serve or outlines the county's technology priorities over a 3-year period. The plan, once adopted, will serve as a roadmap for setting priorities, making investment decisions, and streamlining the delivery of county services through the use of technology solutions. At this point, I'll just sit over here and turn it over to Jared for his presentation, and we'll both be available to answer any questions your board may have at any time during the presentation.
Thank you, Jared. Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Jarrett Thiessen, Deputy Director of Information Technology. I thank you for the opportunity to present to you today the 2017 Information Technology Strategic Plan. My team and I have put a lot of effort and thought into this plan. We began work on this plan back in January of 2017 by meeting with all of the departments and understanding their priorities and their business objectives, and then having just a general discussion around technology changes in their field. From those discussions, we drafted an outline of the strategic plan, which we then reviewed with the County Executive Office, took their feedback, and we drafted the proposal that is in front of you today. As Jerry said, upon approval, it'll serve as a roadmap to prioritize technology projects in the future. Before going into the details of the 2017 plan, I thought it would be good to discuss with you or review kind of the highlights of the previous plan, which was approved in November of 2011. That plan was a 5-year plan, so it gave a 5-year outlook of technology initiatives, and it was developed during a time of economic decline. And it really emphasized technology solutions to offset reductions in staffing levels and funding. It consisted of 182 projects, of which 118 were completed. 19 are underway, which are kind of continuous projects. They'll be underway ongoing in the future. And then we actually reassessed the 45 remaining plans, and some of those were carried forward into the 2017 plan, and some were not because of changes in business objectives and changes in technology. So on to the 2017 plan. Due to the rapid changes in technology these days, we really talked to other counties, we talked to the private sector, we talked to analysts from our information technology research firm, Gartner, and really the guidance that we were receiving was because of the changes in technology, a 5-year plan was not really feasible anymore. So we developed this 3-year plan with 1-year review cycles. So if at the end of a year it is determined that we need to make updates to the plan, we'll do that and we'll resubmit it to your board. This plan, really the high-level goal of this plan is to find ways to better serve our customers by providing higher quality services at competitive prices with shorter delivery times. And we believe we can do that by focusing on these 5 key initiatives that are documented in this plan. So the first initiative is service delivery innovation. And it really seeks ways to better serve our customers by providing higher quality services at competitive prices with shorter delivery times. And we believe we can do that by focusing on these 5 key initiatives that are documented in this plan. So the first initiative is service delivery innovation. And it really seeks ways to better serve our customers by providing higher quality services at competitive prices with shorter delivery times. And we believe we can do that by focusing on these 5 key initiatives that are documented in this plan. So the first initiative is service delivery innovation. And it really seeks ways to it seeks ways to drive efficiencies within our service organization to allow our staff to transform from technology-centric to a business-centric model. And excuse me for a second. We do that by, let me check my notes real quick. We do that by the next one, excuse me, by cloud-based technologies. So cloud-based, traditionally, we've had a server architecture where we've got servers and hardware maintained within our data center. Our staff are really focused on doing the maintenance and upgrades of that hardware. Cloud-based technologies will allow us to transform to where our vendors are taking over that responsibility for us. And there's a couple different flavors of that. So there's one called managed hosting, where we just hand over those servers to our vendors, and they manage those for us, and we're just users of the application. It lets our staff focus on the value-added side of the application versus the day-to-day maintenance of that application. The other flavor is software as a service. With software as a service, the vendor is maintaining all of the systems all the way up through the application, and we just are subscribers to that application. A couple examples of that are the Workday application, which we are in the process of moving our financial and human resource and payroll systems to, and also the website transition project, which was just approved by your board back in October. The next initiative is accessible government, and that really focuses on bringing our services to the citizens of the county. Your board approved the electronic and digital signature policy back in September, and what that really does is allow us to put forms online. So instead of citizens having to come in and fill out forms, they can do that online. We've got two that we've been piloting. One is building permit requests by the building division, and the other is change of address at the assessor's office. So those are ongoing, and we're going to see, more and more applications go that route. In addition to that, we've got social media where we're really just improving and providing additional ways to communicate with our citizens. That's also a part of this. In the future, we'll have web chat through our new website, and the whole website in general will be revamped to improve that communication process. The next one is business automation, and that's really about providing tools and services that allow county staff to do business more productively, wherever they need, whenever they need, and be able to access our internal systems, even when they're off the network. It also covers automating business processes that are currently manual. Again, to be able to do that, we have to understand our customers, and we have to be meeting with our customers and talking to them and understanding what their needs are. And to achieve all those four, information security is the key to all of that. We do have a very strong information technology infrastructure. To kind of round it out or complete that, there's two components that we're planning to bring forward to your board in the near future in the coming months. And one is to really document what our security program is and just basically list out and describe all the components of our security program. And one of those components is going to be an overall security policy, which is a high-level security policy that will be able to be used by all departments. And that'll give us a tool to communicate what our expectations are around security, and it will allow the whole county to really be in a position with the ever-changing threat landscapes that are going on. Technology is changing, month by month. The threat landscape is changing on a day-to-day basis or on an hourly basis, so it'll put us in a stronger position with our security posture. This plan includes 142 projects. 8 are enterprise and 134 are department specific. That's not set in stone. Changes happen throughout the year, so new projects may come on board, which is why we do the annual review. This plan also includes a description of the technology governance process. Back in January of 2017, we restructured that governance process to the 4 tiers that you see up on the screen. Really, the goal of that was to reduce some of the redundancies in committee participation. People were going to sitting on one committee and they were sitting on another committee and spending all their time in committees. So we wanted to really streamline that, but also standardize the approval process to make it easier for the user departments. So just to run through these four hierarchies, at the top level, it's the Executive Technology Steering Committee that's chaired by the County Executive Officer and consists of appointed and elected department heads. Really the goal of that committee is to provide oversight to the other committees and also to ensure technology projects are being aligned with the county organizational goals. The next committee is the Leadership Committee, which I chair and consists of senior management, such as assistant directors and deputy directors, ASOs, and AFOMs, as well as deputy counsel. Really, this is where the projects are being vetted with the departments. Any project that gets reviewed and approved by this then gets reported up to the Executive Steering Committee. I attend those Executive Technology Steering Committee meetings, provide them an overview of what was conducted at the previous Leadership Committee meetings, and take to them any enterprise-wide projects that may be recommended for approval by the Leadership Committee. And then one step down is the Working Committee. So these are really the stakeholders of the applications themselves. So we have got multiple working committees that are reporting up to the Leadership Committee. And so a few examples are a GIS Working Committee. We've got the Web Working Committee. In the future, we're going to have the Workday Working Committee. And so those are really tasked with determining, what changes, what enhancements are required for those applications. And then they weren't even new projects, and then they report those up to the Leadership Committee. And the last level, maybe the most important, is user groups. And this is really an optional level. You'll see this with the enterprise solution. Certainly Workday will have a user group. And this gives the users of the system an opportunity to contribute to future changes for that application. Those ideas and enhancement requests will flow up to the Working Committee, to the Leadership Committee, and eventually make it up to the Executive Technology Steering Committee. To further discuss the committee roles and responsibilities, we provide these 7 criteria when reviewing and vetting our projects. In addition to that, the committees are looking for ways to consolidate, so we don't want to have 2 different departments using very similar applications and paying for both of those and support on both of those. So the committee definitely is looking for ways to consolidate. And in addition to that, once a project goes through this approval process, it still needs to, if it exceeds the delegated purchase authority, would still need to come to your board for approval on an individual basis. And that's also true of the 2017 plan. All the projects listed in there, they exceed that threshold, they would come to your board on an individual basis. So I'm often asked as I'm talking to other counties or vendors, what is the county's approach to information technology? Is it centric, or is it centralized, or is it decentralized? And the answer is simple, it's both. And we really do have a wide variety. We've got some departments that come to the IT division and telecom division for all of their services. And then we've got others that come for just the core services like email and network and telephone, and then they've got an IT department that serves all their other functions, and there's a wide variety in between. So we're definitely a hybrid approach. The key to maintaining that hybrid approach is communication with our customers and with our departments, and again, understanding what their priorities are and what their business needs are, and making sure we work well together. So as you can see from this slide, the Information Technology and Telecommunications Division have 81 staff. All the other departments combined have 34 professional and technical staff. So just in closing, I'd like to thank some of my team members that are here today that put a lot of hard work into this plan. I'll start with Jerry Gamis for his leadership and getting us to the finish line. The IT management team, which I believe are here in the room, Mike Lewis, Dieter Wittenberg, Mike Spack, and Kevin Krogsrud. and Ruth Alwyn, who is to my left here, who provided the editing, did a lot of hard work. She was the one mediating between us on ideas. And then Marinda Glick from Central Services, who did all the great layout and graphic design in the plan, and Eric Bergen, who took the photos. All the photos that you see in the plan are actually staff within the IT and telecommunications divisions. So with that, I'd ask your board to adopt the 2017 plan. I thank you for your continued support, and I'm happy to field any questions that you may have.
Supervisor Euler.
Yeah, the conversation around system security, it seems like we are continue to be focused, as we should be, on data security, threats to, be they internal, external threats to system stability and security. Are we doing anything in terms of infrastructure stability, meaning external threats, EMP threats, those kinds of things, hardening our targets, especially in areas of first responders, making sure that we have continuity of service in the event of some kind of external threat that would attack the entire infrastructure?
So the answer is yes. I don't know how much detail you'd like me to go into here, but we do have a team that are dedicated to information security. We've got IPS, which is intrusion prevention systems that are looking for those threats. We've been enhancing our infrastructure. We just put in new firewalls, for example, that have certain applications on them that can monitor communication going in and out. So typically when a computer gets infected, it'll try to reach out to their command center and receive and send information across that. So we've got applications that are watching that. In addition to your incident response, it sounds like, that you may have been asking. We have an MOU with the California Military Department that in the event of a breach, they will come in and assist us in investigating that incident and responding to that incident.
I'm speaking more specifically to any kind of event like an attack with an electromagnetic pulse that is designed to take down grids, take down systems, and there are steps that are being taken within the private sector to harden the targets against the effectiveness, it's not a word, the effectiveness of those kinds of external threats. Given how we run and operate our own systems, are we looking at what we can do to minimize our exposure to that kind of an external threat?
Disaster recovery certainly plays a big role in that for us. And
recovery does, but that means you've been taken down in the first place.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we have is a state-of-the-art data center here at the county with a redundant data center in South Placer. That data center was built about 20 years ago, and it's served its useful life. So with the development of all these new other technologies such as the cloud and so forth, we are truly looking at partnering, instead of reinvesting millions of dollars in a data center that's going to help us with that type of a prevention, is really partner up with the private sector who has the financial resources to prevent against those types of threats, and then also be able to have those disaster recovery, where it's seamless. So if one area gets attacked, the other area picks up. So we're looking at partnering up with those agencies versus investing in our own, data center upgrades. So we are certainly looking at that. We are partnering up with Office of Emergency Services as well. It's those types of initiatives that we're looking at with regards to this plan.
Yeah, clearly us not running a utility, running water services, anymore, thankfully running sewer services, we don't have the same kind of threat exposure if the technology infrastructure gets taken offline for the grid, those kinds of things. So fortunately we're not that, but I am thinking about our sheriffs and those kinds of folks, that if something were to happen, how quickly are we back up, assuming an interruption. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from any member of the board? Okay. Any members of the public, either here or in Tahoe, have any questions or comments on this? Okay, I see none. I'll bring it back to the board. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are now going to move to the treasurer tax collector items relating to Pioneer Community Energy and Treasury Investments. Janine Windishausen presenting. Welcome.
Thank you. I have two presentations. They are related to your actions. So I'd like to work through the first presentation, and then if you have questions, and then the second, and then we'll go to the action items if you don't mind.
Okay.
So I wanted to give you, title didn't get changed. This is not a rate hearing. Let me get off of that. An update on the implementation of Pioneer Community Energy. If you will indulge me a little bit, I've added a couple of slides that I didn't previously anticipate putting in, providing some background that I know that you're all familiar with, but because we are sending notices and thank you, and the inquiries that we're receiving, I thought it was important to put in the public record a little bit more background. So Pioneer Community Energy is a community choice aggregation program. It is a partnership between the county and the cities of Auburn, Colfax, Lincoln, Rockland, and the town of Loomis. And its formal structure is a joint powers authority. State law under AB 117 authorizes cities and counties either individually or jointly to supply the power to the homes and businesses, essentially the electric energy users, within their jurisdiction. The investor-owned utility, and in our case it would be Pacific Gas and Electric or PG&E, continues to own the transmission and delivery system, in other words, the poles and wires. They continue to operate and service those poles and wires and to respond to outage. We have no ownership and we have no responsibilities associated with maintaining and servicing the poles and wires under a CCA. PG&E continues to do that under regulation of the California Public Utilities Commission. CCAs, what they do is that they purchase the power, and they can do that by purchasing it in the energy market in the same places that PG&E purchases it, that SMUD purchases electricity, that Roseville Electric. We don't purchase it. We could purchase some of our supply from PG&E, but we don't rely on them. If they're selling power, we might, but that's a question that I get asked, and that's why I wanted to clarify that. We are buying in the electric power markets just like other providers. And then we work cooperatively with PG&E to supply the power over their wire. So an analogy I use is that PG&E owns the railroad tracks and the boxcars, and currently they fill the boxcars. We're going to take over filling the boxcars, and they're still going to deliver the electricity. CCAs are governed by boards of local officials, and just like publicly owned utilities like SMUD or Roseville Electric. And their meetings are open to the public and subject to the Brown Act. They provide all of the electricity for all homes and businesses within their jurisdictions to ensure that all customers can benefit from the CCA. The state law under AB 117 requires us to enroll all ratepayers. And the reason for that is that they do not want CCAs to develop and then to cherry pick their customers. We're going to only serve these communities or these categories of ratepayers. As a result, we are obliged to enroll all ratepayers. The ratepayers do have the ability to opt out and continue to receive their electric generation from PG&E if they so wish to do that. All they have to do is contact us and provide us with their account number to do that. The CCA board sets the rates for electricity that they provide, and a CCA may also provide other energy-related programs, such as energy efficiency programs and things like that. So this is just a graphic that shows the first bubble represents some of our local resources, of course, solar. That can be solar on homes. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Or There is potential for waste to energy, biomass, and we also have existing hydroelectric. As I said before, PG&E owns the poles and wires, and they serve the poles and wires, and the electricity procured and supplied by Pioneer Community Energy is delivered over those lines in a cooperative relationship with PG&E for the homes and businesses in Placer County to use. So what does it look like to the customers? The customers do not receive an additional bill. It's a consolidated billing, again, through that cooperative relationship with PG&E. They read the meters every billing cycle. They supply that information to Pioneer. We apply our rates. We provide that information back to PG&E, and then they put it on the bill. If you look at that little number 3 bubble, that's what the bill will look like. It will say Pioneer Community Energy electric generation charges. Separately, PG&E's transmission and delivery charges. The poles and wire service is number 2. So the customer does not have to manage 2 sets of billings. It's all consolidated. Because they are joint customers, if you will, of both Pioneer and PG&E, they still continue to receive many of the services. In fact, most of the services that PG&E provides, such as the CARE program, medical baseline, e-billing, and those types of things. One of the things that they get to take advantage of being a Pioneer customer is lower rates. So we're not the first to do this. We're not the only one to do this. PG&E estimates by the end of this month that over 25% of its customers will be served by a CCA. And there are some estimates as high that as many as 80% of ratepayers within investor-owned utility territory will be covered by a CCA. CCAs can only operate in investor-owned utility territories. They cannot operate within, say, Roseville Electric or SMED territory. The rest of them. Okay, let's see. So, by the way of update and how things are going in terms of the implementation, as of June 27th, 2017, the last of the 5 eligible cities to join Pioneer Community Energy took action to do so, and we were able to then seat a full board. On July 17th, the board changed the name. It was previously Sierra Valley Energy Authority, which was a public finance authority used as a financing conduit for the Empower program. We kind of dusted that off and added provisions to allow the CCA to operate under that. And then on July 31st, the board approved the submission of the CCA implementation plan to the California Public Utilities Commission. And the board then approved a proposed budget in mid-September of just over $37 million. And then on October 31st, the CPUC gave certification of Pioneer Community Energy's implementation plan. Pioneer is now fully registered with the CPUC as a CCA. There were 2 additional administrative steps. We needed to provide them a copy of our service agreement reflecting our cooperative relationship with PG&E, and we also needed to make a $100,000 surety deposit. We've also been busy. As many of you are aware, Pioneer Community Energy is administered and managed by heavily outsourcing the functions that are required to provide the electric generation service. We have entered into a contract with Northern California Power Agency, or more commonly known as NCPA. They're doing load forecasting and load profiling, power procurement. They are also doing CAISO, or California Independent System Operator, interface and schedule coordination, and they're also assisting with regulatory compliance. And they are currently in the market for us. They are soliciting prospective suppliers, and within a few days we'll actually start executing agreements for power. Calpine Energy Solutions has been the provider for all operational CCAs to date to do the data management and data interface with PG&E, that capturing the meter data from PG&E, applying the rates. They also keep a customer information system, which we will have a portal to, so that we can see customer billing, if there's customer correspondence, that's all cataloged in there. And they also operate a call center. And so calls first go to the Calpine Call Center. If they need to be escalated to Pioneer staff, then they do so. We also have contracts with Steve Nichols and Chuck Heiselman. They each individually have almost 40 years of service as PG&E employees in the account management and key accounts area. They are helping with the Calpine contract, and they are also doing key accounts management. So they are actually contacting our largest electric users and finding out if they have special needs, making sure that they're informed about Pioneer and what's happening with Pioneer, and then we will respond accordingly based on those contacts. Myers Nave is a law firm who is representing Pioneer in 4 proceedings in front of the CPUC. They also are available for power supply contract review. So the Pioneer board authorized Pioneer to become a party to 4 proceedings having to do with CCAs and how they do business, essentially. Bryce Consulting has been our human resources consultant. They have developed 29 job classifications, and that includes a series. So a series may have a 1, 2, and a senior, so that I'm counting that. There's not that many specialized positions, but counting all of those 29 job classifications. They've also done a salary schedule based on a market survey that they did. And the Pioneer Board has adopted those job classifications and the salary surveys. And they are developing, they will also do our recruitment for key positions, and they're developing recruitment plans for key positions. Hanson Bridget is another law firm. It's a law firm that the county has worked with related to employee benefits, and they are developing the legal documentation for our benefit package. As you are aware, these employees will have a different benefit package than the county's benefit package because it is a standalone entity, it is an independent entity. It needs its own benefit package. Quinton Timig is another law firm, and they have developed the bond documents that will finance the initial operations, the cash flow, if you will, of Pioneer to make its first purchases before it receives its first revenues. And they also are issuing a legal opinion on the bonds. Pioneer has made its first purchase of power, which the Pioneer Board approved, and that was from the Middle Fork American River project. It was 64 megawatts per month for 5 calendar months in 2018 for a product called Resource Adequacy, which we are required to buy under California regulations. Pioneer is also investigating opportunities to purchase power from other local resources. And yesterday, the Pioneer Board met in this room to consider its initial rate schedules, and they approved rate schedules to reduce the rates on the electric generation component of the bill by 3% than the existing PG&E rates across all rate classes. They also took another action to approve a 3-cent per kilowatt hour for solar customers for net surplus generation. So for solar customers who have generated more than they use, that net is compensated at 3 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a fraction of a cent more than PG&E. PG&E pays, I think it's 2.976 or something like that. So it's just a smidge more. Pioneer has been working hard to get the word out. There have been 6 Board of Supervisors meeting that were actually action items related to this over the last year and a half to 2 years. 19 city council meetings that we have attended and made presentations to, 7 MAC meetings. We have published 26 legal notices of our public meetings, including the rate hearing. Some CCAs actually adopt their rates through just a motion of their board. We did that by a resolution, a public hearing, and it was a public hearing that was legally noticed. The legal notices appeared in all of the local newspapers 2 times before the hearing. That's one of the beauties, if you will, of a CCA, is the ability for the public to access the local decision makers related to their electric service. We also, because of the press release that we also issued related to the rate hearing, received some coverage on KCRA News, and we'll be providing a link to that. We're trying to get a copy of that. They actually, it was on earlier in the day on KCRA, and then in the afternoon they changed it a little bit and ran it again in the evening. I think that was, overall, that was very, very good coverage. They did say that enrollment was mandatory, whereas I think we would actually consider it automatic, if you will. The one hitch that we have had is to get our website up. We had hoped to have it up by now, and through a great suggestion from Supervisor Montgomery, we got a Facebook page up yesterday, so we were able to point the public to the Facebook page and have been able to load information there. And we are monitoring social media and again pointing to our Facebook page. On December 4th, and that's part of the reason of some of the public, more recent public interest, the customers began receiving their notices for automatic enrollment, and they will receive notices based on their billing cycle. So everybody doesn't receive their bill at the beginning of the month. There are, I believe it's 5 different billing cycles. So they will be receiving their notice corresponding to their billing cycle. And by the time all is said and done, every ratepayer will receive at least 4 notices. There is also a special notice that's being developed to be sent here within the next, I would say, probably week or so, to solar customers, because we have a lot of questions around solar. And then that is all in order to commence service at the beginning of February. With each billing cycle, we will, from February 1st, we will start enrolling customers. So Pioneer Community Energy is yet another example, like West Placer Waste Management Authority, like the Middle Fork Authority, of local government officials and government working together to maximize the county's resources and improve the lives of its citizens to bring prosperity to its communities. I wanted to take the time to really thank the board members individually. Jack and Robert, you were very early supporters of this, and you were critical at times in getting this off of the ground. Jim and Robert, you're part of the Middle Fork Finance Authority, and that was part of the vision here, was to be able to utilize and maximize our local resources. And you continue to sit on that board. You've been on that board since its inception, and it's a pleasure doing business with you, so to speak, with that initial purchase of power. And Jennifer and Kirk, you are the county's representatives on the Pioneer Community Energy Board, and were involved, in fact, in yesterday's historic rate-making decision. I also want to call out Jerry Carden, who has just been an absolute rock in providing technical support and legal support all along the way. And so with that, I'm happy to answer your questions related to the update on Pioneer Community Energy.
Any questions on the update? I've seen none. Let's move on to Treasury.
So I'm providing this, well, let's see. I think they'll get it up for me here in just a second. I'm providing this update because your two actions are related to authorizing the purchase of investments for the Placer County Treasurer's investment pool. Security alert, help. I'm not sure what that message is. I know they're working to get the slide up. But I wanted to give you some background. Under government code, if the county treasurer makes an investment that is beyond 5 years to maturity, it requires the approval of the Board of Supervisors. And the reason for that is to make sure that since Treasury, the money that's in the Treasury pool is largely operating funds, that we are not extending too far out, if you will, and not having the funds available. So with that, first of all, I want to explain that the Placer County Treasury serves as a bank to many, not all, but many local governments in Placer County. So under the pink, that represents deposits that are under the control of the Board of Supervisors. The purple are deposits under the control of various school boards throughout the county. School districts are mandated by state law to deposit their money in the county treasury. So the county treasurer is ex officio treasurer for all school districts. Additionally, there's a number of special districts, such as fire districts and cemetery districts, who are also required to deposit their money in the treasury. And then we have a number of voluntary depositors. It's a number of special districts and some cities who have chosen to deposit their money in the Placer County Treasury to take advantage of our professional money management services. So as the bank, meeting the withdrawal demands of our depositors is our first priority. Beyond that, balances are invested to achieve a return on investment, and that return on investment is shared by all of the depositors. So we actually run an apportionment, which we determine the average daily balance every month in the Treasury, and if as a depositor, your average daily balance, I'm just going to pick one, let's say Sierra College, let's say their average daily balance is 10% of the money on deposit in the Treasury, then they will receive 10% of the investment earnings that month. We net out the cost of the Treasury operations before we apportion that. So the Treasury operations are heavily funded by all of those depositors that you saw on the previous pie chart. And so then, in order to make sure that we're meeting those withdrawal demands, the cash flow analysis and cash management are key to our investing. So I'm providing you both a long history and a short history. And what this graph represents is the high point and the low point every year since 2001 fiscal year in the Treasury. So the blue bar is our low point. That usually occurs in November before property taxes are collected. Our high point, which is the green bar, occurs in late April after we have collected property taxes. So many of our depositors have a primary revenue source of property taxes that are deposited when the tax collector's office collects those deposits, and then they basically have to make those last until they start their fiscal year on July 1. They go almost 6 months before they have receive their revenues for the year. So managing that cash. This is the same graph, but for a shorter time span. So the point that I want to make here is that when we look at this history, in theory, and I'm sorry that the numbers are a little bit blocked off there, but we can see that the high point in the Treasury is over $1 billion, that's with a B, and $5 now. We can see that at some level below the blue bar, investments can be made, in theory, indefinitely, if you will. And so what we have done is we have tried to make the Treasury a resource locally. And it's what I call investing in Main Street over Wall Street. Government code prescribes what are allowable investments for a county treasurer to invest the money in. They are predominantly money market instruments, government bonds and fixed income government bonds, and highly rated corporate bonds. But a county treasurer can also invest in the debt of local government in the state of California. So this is a list of the almost 20 different investments we have made locally. The top of the list is the Middle Fork project. As many of you are aware, because of contractual arrangements to get the project built and such, there was funding needed for the relicensing of that project and for capital improvements. That was done through actually a line of credit of $100 million. They ended up borrowing just over $84 million before we stopped the line of credit and converted that to a fully amortized debt that they're paying debt service on. I listed here the original amount that we advanced, but they have paid that down through their regular debt service payments by at least $5 million now. You're also aware, your board took action on the purchase of the sheriff's helicopter a number of years ago, and of course when we did these deals, or is listed there in the from column. We've also assisted school districts. I got a call from Rockland School District a number of years ago, and they said,
And
we've got a, pardon me?
Janine, I'm sorry, I just want to be mindful of our time here.
Sure.
And
Okay.
that we have a number of other department items still to go. I think
I have just one or two more slides here.
Okay.
This just shows the line down the middle of this graph is as of June 30th. So anything that is completely, any bar that's completely to the left are investments that we've made that have fully paid off. So it basically shows when we advance the funds and when the payoff is due. I actually think that is my last slide. And with that, there are 3 actions. One is that the Pioneer Community Energy Joint Powers Authority calls for an alternate member in the absence of your representatives, that is Supervisor Euler and Supervisor Montgomery. And pursuant to the memo, we're requesting that Supervisor Duran be appointed as the alternate in the absence of the regular representatives. And then the other 2 items have to do with approving the investment in a $40 million bond that will operate like a line of credit. It has very flexible terms. Pioneer will be able to pull down what they need, no prepayment penalty, so very flexible terms. It will be amortized over 30 years, but there is a balloon after 5.5 years to pay off the outstanding balance. And then Mid-Placer Transportation Agency is purchasing buses. We have assisted them with that in the past, and they're issuing debt in the amount of $400,000 for the purchase of buses that I'm also requesting your approval of.
Perfect. All right. Any questions or clarifications from any member of the board for Janine? Okay. Any questions or clarifications before we move to the actions from any members of the public? Okay, I see none. I will bring this back to the board. I would suggest that we move through these in the order of 6A, 3, then 4, and then 5, please. What's the pleasure of the board?
Resolution regarding the purchasing of the investments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on 6A3 on our board packet. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Second.
All right, this is a motion on 6A4 of our board packet. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
And I move the resolution authorizing the treasurer to actually purchase the the investment tool described.
Second.
And that is a motion on 6A5. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Robert, why are you glaring at me? All right. We are now going to move. Thank you, Janine, very much. Much appreciated. We are now going to move to agenda item 7. This is a Public Works and Facilities item, Highway 49 Beautification and Sidewalk Project. This is a budget revision, so it will require a roll call.
Good afternoon, Chairman Montgomery and members of the board. My name is Ken Grimm with the Department of Public Works and Facilities. Today, we're asking you to approve a budget revision for $800,000, which includes an appropriation of new dollars of $578,949 in rural exchange funds from the Regional Surface Transportation Program, which is federal and state dollars, for the Highway 49 Beautification and Sidewalk Project. In addition to that, we're also asking you to cancel general fund reserves in the amount of $726,917.31 that your board previously approved in July. This is just the accounting to allow that money to be moved. So on March 7th, earlier this year, your board awarded a contract to Western Engineering Contractors in an amount of $1,465,000 to construct the proposed improvements along Highway 49. That project has now been substantially completed. Most of the actions that we're looking at today are really fiscal year accounting decisions to move money that we were going to spend last year, move it into this year. The one exception to that is the appropriation of the $578,949 in Regional Surface Transportation Program funds. So those funds are needed for various overruns associated on the project. Some of those increasing the cost from $2 million to $2.5 million in total project costs. Those costs are spread out over the entire project. In fact, we had some of the typical construction cost changes we had. We made some drainage improvement changes to make sure that our improvements didn't harm any of our adjacent neighbors. We had some unforeseen utilities. But the single largest item we had to do with mandated night work associated with Caltrans. Caltrans, we get a permit from Caltrans for the project. That permit did not require any sort of night work and was told how we were going to do the work. But it did require our contractor to get their own rider permit from Caltrans for the work. Ours did not require night work. When the contractor went to Caltrans, they said, you're going to do night work. So we had some delays associated with, well, originally they wanted us to do almost everything night work. We ended up having to make some changes, some negotiation, took some time, actually delayed the project for a period of time. But we worked through that to agree to somewhere in between, where there was some night work, some not, and some day work that was being done. Through that, we did delay the project, and actually the contractor only accounts for about a fourth of that cost, that $500,000 in cost. In fact, the construction change orders for this project are about 8%, so they fall within our typical range of improvements. But it was paying premiums, paying for the work associated with bringing in light to do night work. But in addition to that, we had increases in our construction manager time, which is about another fourth of the cost. That was associated with an extended time period now of construction, but it was also having now to provide people not just during the day, but during the day and the night shifts. And so those costs approximately doubled. We also had increases just working through those issues. There were a commensurate increase in the design costs or from the designer associated with those changes and in county staff time. So it did come up roughly broken into fourths, a fourth for county staff time, fourth for the construction manager, a fourth from the contractor, and a fourth for the design engineer, totaling the $500,000 that we're proposing that your board appropriate today. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from any board member? I see none. I just want to say that the project looks fantastic, and I've gotten really, really positive feedback from people on it. So my thanks for all your efforts on keeping this moving forward. Any questions or comments from any member of the public on this? Okay, seeing none, I will bring this back to the board. We have a motion and a second. This is a roll call because it is a budget revision.
Duran? Yes. Wygant? Yes. Holmes? Yes. Euler? Montgomery?
Yes. All right, thank you very much, Ken. We're now going to move to agenda item 7B. This is a master lease agreement. Lori Morse is not presenting. Well, there's a whole team, sorry. Okay, so this is a master lease agreement for the Pioneer Community Energy team.
I wish to introduce Karen Boulay, member of my staff from Property Management. She's our project manager. She'll be providing your presentation today on this item.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. Pleasure to be here today. I'm Karen Boulay from Property Management, Department of Public Works and Facilities. And today we're here to ask you the board's approval for first to authorize the Director of Public Works to enter into a master lease agreement between Placer County and the trustees of the Whole Survivors Trust for a commercial property at 2510 Warren Drive. We're also asking for the board's approval and authorization for the director or his designee to also enter into the sublease between Pioneer and the county for the same premises. And this would be subject to, of course, County Council's approval and risk management approval, both of those leases. We're also asking for the board to approve a budget revision establishing a new capital project for the Pioneer Community Energy Warren lease, project number 4546. And as you heard just a few minutes ago, you heard a presentation from Janine regarding this exciting program that's coming to the county to help the citizens and communities with respect to their energy. And they need a place to land, and they need a place to call their own to conduct their business. And in anticipation of launching in 2018, they asked Property Management to start searching for a premises for them that met specific criteria. And we commenced that search in November of 2016. We employed the services of our commercial broker who began searching for properties and looking. We actually looked at, it was between 12 and 14 different properties to see if they would meet our needs. We actually negotiated 6 properties, but after careful consideration and after looking at the criteria, Pioneer did determine that the property at 2510 Warren Drive best suit their needs for now and for in the future. And so with that being said, I would like to kind of just go over some of the criteria that was important to Pioneer and what we considered as we looked for the properties. First, the property had to be in a convenient and centralized location, and that was very important to serve all the citizens in the communities of this county, to make it easy access as best as possible. I know that Tahoe's far away, but they also wanted a minimal and minimum tenant improvement costs to keep the costs down as far as taking on this premises. So, and that was applicable to any property they looked at, is what could we do with the minimal tenant improvements with the premises we were looking at. We also were looking at competitive rent, of course. We wanted to keep the cost down on rent, and this particular property actually has one of the lowest rents that we could find out of all the premises that we negotiated. So we were very pleased with how this rent came out on this property. We were also looking for a property that was appealing and functional and met the needs of the staff, that it was a pleasant place to work, that it allowed for collaborative space, and this property also meets that requirement, which is really good. It has a number of areas where the staff can get together and discuss the issues before them, and also have their own private space for which they can work and conduct their business. And also private conference rooms where they can sign documents and have counseling sessions as needed. And one of the most important things, of course, is that the landlord was willing to sublease. We have, Pioneer is a fantastic program that's coming to the county, but unfortunately does not have a lease history behind it. So that posed a problem for some landlords, and they wanted to have the county become the leaseholder. And we wanted to be able to sublease. So this to sublease to Pioneer to allow them to start building their rental history. The landlord at 2510 Warren Drive was wonderful. They were absolutely amenable to allowing Pioneer to sublease from us as soon as we leased the premises. So, and that was actually in our LOI as we were negotiating this term, or negotiating this lease. So, we were successful in negotiating the sublease with Pioneer. Pioneer's board, as you may know, some of you know, it was adopted and approved by their board last night. The sublease is approved, so we're moving forward in that side. One of the key terms that was important, and I think it's very important to the county, is that there's the ability for the county to assign this lease to Pioneer in the future, and we're looking for that assignment to occur not sooner than 2 years. So we're still working out the details, the tiny details on that, but right now we know that this lease can be assigned to Pioneer in 2 years, but that the county will remain as a guarantor for 3 years following that assignment. And then after the 3 years is up, the county can be fully released from that lease and the obligations therefrom through novation. And then Pioneer will be on its own in that lease and responsible for all the requirements. One of the things that's important too is that Pioneer is to, I might be jumping ahead of myself because I'm very excited about this premises. I think it's going to create a great opportunity for Pioneer. So pardon my exuberance, but it's great. The landlord actually allowed Pioneer to pay the rent directly. And this was, as we're negotiating the master lease, the landlord is in agreement that Pioneer can pay directly, whereas it gives up some kind of control from the landlord to allow that, where they would prefer to have, I'm working directly with you, county. Of course, we remain responsible, but it allows Pioneer to start the relationship with the landlord. So, with that said, I'll just give you a brief description of the property. The physical attributes are centrally located. I think we discussed that. Minimal tenant improvements, competitive rent. I think we've already gone over this because I was very excited about it. One of the things that I don't know if we went over is that this space is a professional space, but it's modest. So it presents well, but it's not an A-class building that creates the air of, we're just overspending money. It's a great building. It also has the ability to expand as the program needs to expand. So this building is an actual independent building. It sits independent of all buildings around it. It's within a owners association where all the buildings are same and similar in design. They're all one story, so they're easy access for all the people that need to come to the office. And it can allow, and the lease allows for Pioneer for the first offer to lease the contiguous space in the building. We are negotiating suites B and C, and there's suite A is remaining in the standalone building. And if that lease becomes available, Pioneer has the first opportunity to lease that space. But the best part is that even if that space doesn't come available when Pioneer is ready, the other buildings surrounding the Pioneer's building actually are so similar, and they're within walking distance, and there's quite frequently spaces come up that are a smaller space, 1,500 to 2,200 and more square feet, which they could acquire and then just walking distance back and forth as needed. So some of the key terms of the master lease that I'd like you to be aware of as we go forward is that the parties are at the master lease will be the trustees of the whole survivors trust are the landlords and will be the tenants on the master lease. It's a 6,020 square foot premises. The initial rent will be $9,933 per month for the first year with annual escalation at 3% throughout the initial term, or actually all terms. It's an 88-month initial term with 2 subsequent 5-year extensions, if they so elect. There is free month that's been offered and negotiated, and the free rent is totals over $42,000. Specifically, it's $42,802.65. The county will be responsible under the master lease for the utilities, which would be electric, gas, phone, cable, internet, janitorial, and security. And the landlord would be responsible for all other expenses, and there would be no pass-through expenses to the tenant. The landlord, as I said, does approve of the sublease to Pioneer, and we're moving on with that approval of the assignment and the sublease and an assignment. As I also indicated, that Pioneer does have the right to first offer on any lease that's available from that landlord at that site. And the key sublease terms is that the parties are the county as sublessor and Pioneer as sublessee, and it is the Pioneer will enter the sublease subject to the master lease terms, and with the addition that we know that Pioneer is going to pay the rent directly to the landlord, but that Pioneer is also going to reimburse the county under the sublease for negotiating both leases and drafting both leases for the staff services for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and the other things that are necessary in order to take occupancy of this premises. They will be obligated under the sublease to reimburse the county within 30 days after taking occupancy, or after the first date. I want to make sure I say it exactly right. Within 30 days of the lease commencement date. And that date is actually the first of the month following when the tenant improvements are complete and 21 days of move-in time has been granted. So we have wherever that ends. So for example, if it's January 21st, following the 21 days, it would be sometime in February would be the end of the 21 days. So we would begin renting on March 1st would be the lease commencement date. But we don't have that certain yet, that date certain.
Okay, terrific. I think we can assume that a lot of this has been covered in the report.
Yes.
Did the board have any additional questions on this presentation?
If I could just add, there is a budget revision.
Yes.
To establish the budget revision in the amount of $600,000 to develop or establish that account project, Pioneer Community Energy Warren Drive Lease Project number 4546.
Yep. Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any member of the board? Any questions or comments from any member of the public here or in Tahoe? I see none. Excellent presentation. Great report. Thank you. What is the pleasure of the board? We have a motion and a second. This is a budget revision, so this will be a roll call.
Duran. Yes. Wygant. Yes. Holmes. Yes. Euler. Montgomery.
Yes. Thank you very much. Excellent. All right, we're going to move to agenda item 7. This is the Sheriff's Office video surveillance and data storage upgrades with multiple vendors. Mark Giacomini presenting. Welcome. Hi.
Good afternoon. Chair Montgomery, members of the board, Mr. Bosch, Mr. Carden, Mark Giacomini with the Placer County Sheriff's Office. I am joined by Jerry Carden, who's our IT manager.
I don't think so.
I'm sorry, Jerry Silva.
I'm like, really?
I just said hi to you. Sorry for the demotion, Jerry. Jerry Silva, who's our IT manager, who aspires to be an attorney. And I have him here for very good counsel. So before I get into the board item, I know most board members have taken a tour of the jail facilities and been privy to our video surveillance systems. And so what we're here today is to talk to you about the video surveillance systems at both of the jails and talk to you about a project where we are increasing and upgrading cameras and our storage at both facilities. The statutory requirements right now are for 1 year and 1 day of storage to be maintained. In talking to many of my peers up and down the state, the new normal throughout the state of California is 3 years of maintenance of video storage, so 37 months essentially. At the advice of our county council, who has recommended we look at more storage, and pretty much the normal throughout the state now, we're looking at a project to increase our storage at both facilities to 37 months. Unfortunately, it's not cheap, and so what I'm here today is to ask you to approve a couple of contracts with multiple vendors to look at both facilities, buy some additional cameras in Auburn, and increase our storage over the period of about 3 or 3.5 years to the 37 months. It's not, the reason the IT guy's here is because it's not like, me going and buying a mobile command vehicle where I know what I'm getting. This is over the years, we're going to have to see how much video is being shot, how much is being retained, and then how much storage is required to get to that 3 years. So it's not an easy number to get to. We came up with a number, but we could be hopefully less than that as we get over the 3.5 years. So the number we're looking at is $1.4 million coming from 2 different sources, multiple vendors that buys hardware and software and service. So specifically what we're asking today is that your board approve an agreement with CDW of Lincolnshire, Illinois for the purchase of software, hardware, and services associated with the video surveillance system and data storage subsystems at the Auburn Jail and the South Placer Jail in a not-to-exceed amount of $950,000 for the remainder of this fiscal year through fiscal year 2021. Additionally, we're asking your board approval of an agreement with Convergent Technologies of Schaumburg, Illinois, for the purchase of software, hardware, and services associated with the video surveillance system and data storage and subsystems at the South Placer Jail in a not-to-exceed amount of $200,000 for the remainder of this year and fiscal year 18-19. We'd also like your approval to approve for a purchase order with Telesonics, doing business as Sonatrol of Sacramento, California, for video surveillance system improvements, including additional and upgraded cameras for the Auburn Jail in the amount of $260,000. We also would like your board's approval to approve a budget revision, moving funds of $705,000 from public safety reserves and $705,000 from the capital reserves, and putting those funds into a CEO budget so we can draw down as we need over the next 3.5 years. When we looked at the funding for this, I was reluctant to have that put directly into the sheriff's budget, because if this was a single-year project, that would make more sense. But because it's a multi-year project, now we're tracking and rolling money over for a number of years. We just felt as though it would be easier to put it in the CEO budget, invoice that way, and then draw the money down as it's needed over the next 3.5 years. We also would like your approval to add the equipment that we purchased initially to the master fixed asset list that's attached to your board item, and then authorize the purchasing manager to sign all required documents. And with that, we can answer any questions that you might have. I do apologize the jail captains aren't here, but I know that you had your walkthroughs with them, and I will answer the questions the best I can, but they had prior commitments.
Any questions, comments, or concerns from any member of the board? I see none. Any questions, comments, concerns from any member of the public? I see none. I'll bring it back to the board. Have a motion and a second, and Supervisor Duran, I'm assuming that motion includes 8A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, this is a roll call.
Duran, Wygant, Holmes, Euler, Montgomery.
Yes, excellent. Thank you so
Fantastic.
much.
Thank you so much.
Mission accomplished. All right, we will move to agenda item 9. This is a county executive item. This is an annexation into the Sunset Industrial Area Community Facilities District 2012-1. We will be conducting a public hearing. John McEldowney will be presenting. Welcome.
Good afternoon or good morning. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is John McEldowney, Emergency Services Program Manager, fellow board members. Today I'm going to ask that you conduct a public hearing, consider all protests, tabulate ballots, and adopt a resolution to annex assessor's parcel number 495-020-004, owned by W.M. Lyles Company Limited, into Community Facilities District number 2012-1, that's the Sunset Industrial Area Services, and apply the established charge for fire protection services and emergency medical services on this parcel within the said district. By way of background, in November 2012, your board approved the formation of Community Facilities District 2012-1, henceforth referred to as CFD 2012-1, to fund ongoing fire protection and emergency services, equitably basically spread costs of both fire protection and emergency medical services to new development within the SIA via this special assessment on property taxes of annexed parcels. In 2012, the maximum annual assessment was the greater of either 8 cents per square foot of building or $757 per acre. These unit rates were presented in 2012 dollars at the time, obviously, and subject to an annual inflationary adjustment for properties annexed into the CFD. Current rates today are 9 cents per square foot, or, again, this is a greater, 9 cents per square foot of building, or $816.79 per acre. This annexation is consistent with and supports board policy to spread the cost of funding fire protection and emergency medical services equitably to development within the Sunset Industrial Area. In terms of fiscal impact, this annexation meets Placer County's general plan goals and policies associated with the equitable apportionment of fire service costs within the SIA and will allow for a graduated reduction in the general fund contribution to fire services within the SIA over time. Unless there's any questions, I request that you conduct a hearing.
All right, I will first see if there's any questions from the board. I see none. I will open the public hearing. The public hearing is opened. This is where we will consider all protests, tabulate ballots, and be asked to adopt a resolution. Are there any members of the public who wish to make comment on this item? I see none. I am going to close the public hearing. And I am going to ask the clerk of the board to announce the ballot results.
We received one ballot. All in favor.
Excellent. Unanimous. All right, what is the pleasure of the board?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Oh, public hearing, roll call? No. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent. We will now move to County Council closed session.
The board will now adjourn to closed session to discuss the closed session items listed on page 5 of the agenda. First, there will be a conference with legal counsel to discuss 3 items of existing litigation. The item of anticipated litigation is not ready for discussion, will not be discussed in closed session today. And then the board will also have a discussion of public employee appointment regarding the county executive officer.
How long do you think that will take, Terry?
The board has returned from closed session at a conference with legal counsel. Under existing litigation, the board discussed the case of Krekeman Martin versus County of Placer. The board heard a report on the case and gave direction to counsel. In the case of County of Placer versus S.W. Allen, the board heard a report and gave direction to counsel. In the case of Franklin versus County of Placer, the board heard a report of this new case and authorized the defense and indemnity of the county officials and employees named and served in that litigation. The board also had a discussion of public employment, public employee appointment. No action was taken.
Thank you, Jerry. We will adjourn to a special board meeting on Wednesday, December 13, 2017 at 8:30 a.m. in these chambers.